Someone make it make sense.
Probably a couple.
Hello, hello, hello. We are here with the next installment of the Casey Anthony trial series. So the multiple medical examiners part 2 and part 1. I feel like that feels like forever ago. I don't think it was actually that long ago, but we've had a number of live streams since then, including for Brian Koberger, for Karen Reed. So for anyone who's new, feel free to check out those as well. I do have on my channel playlists for every case, if we're talking pre-trial or post-trial, and every trial that I've covered. So you can see everything organized that way. And usually it's in like chronological order of the most recent. So for anyone who is interested, but without further ado, let's jump right on in and see what else we have in store in this episode.
It's a house.
John J. Shultz, SCHULTZ.
You may proceed.
Good morning, sir. Good morning. Would you please tell us, how are you employed? Excuse me? How are you employed? What do you do? Oh, I'm,
What a weird start, weirdest start. Like the fact that he was like, excuse me? Like, what did you think? And then his response was so, can we just watch that again? That is bizarre.
ULTZ.
You may proceed.
Good morning, sir. Good morning. Would you please tell us, how are you employed? Excuse me? How are you employed? What do you do? Oh, I'm associate professor of anthropology at the University of Central Florida. And how long have you held that position? I started at UCF 2003 as an assistant professor and was promoted 2009, 2010. And in what department do you work? Anthropology. Do you have a subspecialty within the field of anthropology? Yes. Through my education, my specialty would be forensic anthropology, forensic archaeology. Okay. Can you just give us some of your educational background in that field that led you to your present position? My undergraduate degree is from State University of New York at Stony Brook. The degree is in anthropology. Let me ask you, for benefit of the court reporter, slow down just a little bit. Oh, okay. No problem. You tend to talk just a little bit fast. All right. My undergraduate degree is from the State University of New York.
So this is the first. So when the multiple medical examiners, it's not just multiple medical examiners. What we've seen with every witness is that every witness has testified many, 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 many times. I mean, it was weird enough at like 2 times, 3 times, but there's some, as I'm editing the videos going forward, where it's like their 6th time. It's so bizarre. But even weirder is they don't just have 2 medical examiners. They have 2 forensic anthropologists. And of course, that's not even counting Dr. Voss, Dr. Arpad Voss, who it wasn't even really clear what his category was, because he kind of said, I do all the things, or I don't fit into one category, but like he could be kind of put in that category as like a forensic anthropologist, but I don't really know what to count him as. But the weird thing is, so 2 forensic anthropologists and 2 forensic pathologists, aka medical examiners. And so this is our first of the 2 forensic anthropologists.
At Stony Brook. The degree is in anthropology. My focus was biological anthropology. I have a master's degree in human biology from University of Indianapolis.
And I will be honest,
for that,
I can't even say that there's not a 3rd one, because there's been so many that there might even be a 3rd forensic anthropologist. I feel like that might be, but there's at least 2. That's the point.
Program, we focused in human anatomy, skeletal anatomy, forensic archaeology, as well as taphonomy. I have a PhD from the University of Florida in anthropology. My specialty was forensic anthropology, forensic archaeology, and while at the University of Florida, I spent 5 years at the Human Identification Lab, which is a forensic anthropology lab.
Imagine that.
Tell, if you will, what the difference is between forensic anthropology and forensic archaeology. Okay. As a forensic anthropologist, my specialty in that area would be study of the human skeleton. So we have courses in human anatomy, human skeletal anatomy, human variation, other types of biological courses. For a forensic Sure. The whole answer? Sure. Okay.
Just to slow down and say,
Okay, no problem.
Amazing. Great.
Sorry about that.
That's all right. We'll remind you.
Okay.
You're not the first.
Can you please repeat the question?
Oh my God. What am I?
My God, I can't remember it. I think I was just asking you
This is insane. The way that they are starting this off with the whole thing of like, what'd you say with his occupation? Let's just see this. This is incredible to watch. What a mess.
The whole answer? Sure. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, no problem. Sorry about that.
That's all right. We'll remind you.
Okay.
You're not the first.
Can you please repeat the question?
My God, I can't remember it. I think I was just asking.
Incredible. Incredible.
Between
Yes.
forensic anthropology.
I've literally never heard a judge do that. I've never heard a judge do that. Ever. He's answering the question as to what the question was. Does that blow y'all's mind? Because the normal procedure would be for Mr. Ashton to say, oh my God, I can't remember what it was. I mean, normally you wouldn't say it like that. That's ridiculous. What you should do. Okay. What should happen in this situation is if this witness, like he just did, says, could you please repeat the question? If Mr. Ashton doesn't remember his question, which first of all, I think that's terrible and that happens with attorneys. But second of all, what you do is instead of saying, oh, I forgot it, or I don't remember, you just say, Madam Court Reporter, can you please repeat the question? And then they read it. But even if you do what Mr. Ashton did and you're like, oh my God, I can't remember. The next thing that should happen is Mr. Ashton then asks the court reporter to repeat the question. What's weird, this is so wild because Judge Belvin answers this. I've literally never seen this. And I mean, this is mind-boggling.
And forensic archaeology.
Okay. All right. As a forensic anthropologist.
Let's just one more time because it's just incredible.
As a forensic anthropologist, my specialty in that area would be study of the human skeleton. So we have courses in human anatomy, human skeletal anatomy, human variation, other types of biological courses. For a forensic Sure.
Where it really goes off
the whole answer? Sure. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, no problem. Sorry about that.
That's all right. We'll remind you.
Okay.
You're not the first.
Can you please repeat the question?
My God, I can't remember it. I think I was just.
It's really ironic too because Mr. Ashton is just saying how he's going to remind him of stuff, and then he's like, "I forgot." Like, wow.
Just asking you
Between
Yes.
forensic anthropology and
forensic archaeology.
Okay. All right. As a forensic anthropologist, our specialty would be studying the human skeleton. As a forensic archaeologist, we would have a specialist dealing with going out to the field, working with law enforcement, collecting skeletal remains, interpreting taphonomy at the site. Within the definition of forensic anthropology, locating and recovering human remains is part of that definition. I also include myself as my specialty because my research area has specifically been in forensic archaeology and field methods.
And you used a term called taphonomy. What is taphonomy?
Taphonomy is studying what happens after a body's been after death. So that could be studying changes to the skeleton itself, but changes how the skeleton may have been dispersed at a site.
All right. You mentioned that you spent 5 years at the Human Identification Laboratory. Could you?
For anyone who hasn't seen some of the previous episodes of this or this entire trial or whatever, I'll just make a note just because we're into this whole thing with bones. They do not show any graphic images at all. The cameras, the court cameras, actually what happened was Judge Belvin gave them permission to show that, but just blur out certain things. They didn't even do it. They were like, we're pointing the cameras away. We're pointing them at the witness or the attorney or the gallery. So you don't have to worry about any of that. They don't show anything. So just want to make a note of that.
Explain to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what that is,
Okay.
what they do there.
There are a number of prominent PhD programs in forensic anthropology in the United States. where they have laboratories where they do numerous cases. So the lab at the University of Florida is known specifically for providing a service throughout the state of Florida to medical examiners, even the state archaeologists, that when there are skeletonized remains, they can be sent to that lab and analyzed. And so as a graduate student, that's a wonderful place to go to school because there's a continuous flow of skeletal cases, and that would be part of our training as a graduate student.
So you actually get cases from all around the state of Florida that come through the laboratory at
Yeah,
Gainesville.
most of the state, there are more people now that work in the state, some of which have come out of that lab that may be doing some of those localized areas, but that state deals primarily with the University of Florida.
And who did you study under at the...
While I was at the University of Florida, I studied with Dr. Anthony Falsetti was my dissertation advisor, and Dr. Michael Warren was also in residence there while I was a graduate student.
Is there a particular area in forensic archaeology that you specialize
Yeah.
in?
A little bit of foreshadowing there.
My
A little bit of foreshadowing there because I believe Michael Warren is one of the other forensic anthropologists who we will be hearing from, I believe, in the next episode.
specialty, would be detecting human remains. My dissertation involved using ground penetrating radar, which is a tool used in archaeology. It's also used in many other areas.
What's really funny is that Dr. Ross talked about and how, in his opinion, that sucks. You know, it's like he like made such light of that with like the other, because that was his whole thing, right? Clandestine graves. It's like they needed him to come along and be like the savior of the world. I mean, in his opinion, right? The savior of the world by whatever it was, smelling the air or putting leashes on flies, things like that, you know, to find these clandestine graves because the ground penetrating radar wasn't sufficient. So pretty funny.
A remote sensing tool, non-invasive. So we're going to use the tool to try to...
I will also note that this is in 2011, right? This investigation was 2008, but this trial was 2011. They still use that ground penetrating radar. That's what they still use now.
Locate changes in the ground. And one change in the ground could be a burial at a cemetery. It could be an archaeological site. It can also be a possible grave. So my dissertation and the research I continue at UCF has involved using remote sensing tools, particularly GPR.
All right. Now, when you came to work at UCF, did you enter into a working relationship with the medical examiner, the District 9 medical examiner?
Yes. When I first arrived at UCF, I was making contact with the local community to continue doing forensic work. As part of a professor, it's expected that UCF's a metropolitan university. We are expected to work with the community, and all of the professors I've worked with have worked with the community. So it's something that would be expected from us. So I made contact with the medical examiner as well as the sheriff's department, and I was able to start doing skeletal cases and assist with recoveries on an as-needed basis.
Now, prior to your coming to UCF and making yourself available to the local law enforcement agencies, was there a local forensic anthropologist working here, or did they have to call people from Gainesville?
Dr. Dupre is a biological anthropologist at the university. She's primarily bioarchaeologist. She studies skeletal remains from archaeological contexts. I think she probably did. Oh, no problem. Sorry about that.
There we go. Yeah.
Dr. Dupre, who is primarily a bioarchaeologist, would also do some of the forensic work. I think she did a few forensic cases. Okay. And then I think they also had sent some cases to Gainesville.
Okay. But there wasn't a local forensic anthropologist until you got here to fill that.
She was at the university, but she wasn't working with the scope of the types of cases that I do with the medical examiner.
All right. So did you develop a relationship with the medical examiner's office where you would be their sort of on-call forensic anthropologist if they needed it?
Yes. So I served as a local resource with them. So if skeletal remains were found, they could call me up and I could be readily available based on my schedule at the University of Central Florida.
Now, around December the 11th of 2008, did you receive a notification from the medical examiner's office that your services might be needed?
I received a phone call from Steve Hansen, and I think Dr. G had also called me that day.
They don't know
And
who
did they
Dr.
inform
G
you
is
that
yet.
there might be skeletal remains that you could assist in examining?
This is gross. The jury does not know who Dr. G is yet. She has not testified yet. They have heard reference to a Dr. Janet Garavaglia, but they've not heard about her nickname being Dr. G. And why do I say that? Because she had a TV show called Dr. G Medical Examiner on Discovery Health. And what's so crazy is he just says, oh, I think Dr. G, blah, blah. And what Mr. Ashton doesn't do is say, oh, by Dr. G, do you mean, I mean, even if whether she's, okay, it doesn't even matter if the person's famous or not or whatever. It's like, Dr. G, that's not their real name, right? Like, Dr. K, well, you for the record, you have to clarify who, because that's not specific. You know, there's a lot of doctors with the last name that starts with K, just like there's a lot of doctors with the last name that starts with G. It blows my mind that Mr. Ashton just skips right on over it. So they have no idea who he's talking about, and it's just not good practice, man.
Yes, I was called to ask if I could, if I was able to go to the scene that day to participate in the initial recovery.
Now, were you present at the scene when the skull and the first bones that were found were actually removed?
No, the first day I was not available. I was not available to go to the scene, excuse me. That was finals week at University of Central Florida. I had to do an osteology study of the skeleton, and I had to make sure I had coverage for my final before I was actually able to leave. And by that time, I think everything had already been recovered.
By everything, you mean the initial?
Correct,
stuff that was
the
found.
initial,
Okay.
yes.
Did you then go, so where did you go to start assisting in this investigation?
I went directly to the medical examiner's office.
All right. Now, when you arrived there, was the skull had it already arrived at the medical examiner's office? Do you recall?
Honestly, I don't remember.
Okay.
If the material was already there.
What is your first recollection of seeing the skull or what it was contained in?
Well, I remember looking in the bag and seeing the skull in the bag. Did see some duct tape. I did not want to interfere with the duct tape, so I essentially tore the corners of the bag to lay the bag flat so the skull was not handled in any way.
All right. Were you present when the initial photography was done of the skull sitting in its position in the bag, once the bag is torn away?
Correct, yes, I was there.
So that was documented before it was moved in any way?
Yeah, and that was documented. I was there when it was documented, and then x-rays were already, I don't remember when the x-rays were completed since I was assisting, I was not in charge. And I do remember at one point during the photography process, I held the skull up so photographs could be taken of the underside of the skull itself.
If we could publish State's Exhibit in Evidence 218, is this one of the photographs that you're referring to where you are holding the skull so that it can be photographed?
Correct. Right at the very top of the screen, I guess it's where the blue color changes. That should be a glove of mine holding it up.
Up here?
Correct.
No, it didn't quite work, but we got it. We got the message. All right. And again, did you observe the things that are being photographed here as far as the position of the tape and the jaw and the hair mat, et cetera?
Yes.
Now, with reference to the mandible, was the mandible still, is there a term of art called anatomical position?
Y'all, did you hear the lollyism with reference to? You just don't hear that very often. I mean, I would never have noticed it ever were not for Lolly ruining that phrase for you. But now it's like you notice it. And that's when you realize it's really not that often that we hear that, but we just got a lollyism. So let's just say shout out to the Lallybird, who thankfully we don't have to hear from that much anymore because he just sits there like a toad on a log.
Within your field?
Yes. Well, anatomical position would be the normal position. If we're referring to the skeleton, the normal position the bones would be when somebody would be during life.
All right. I'm going to have him talk about it a little bit. Now, was the mandible, when the skull came in close to anatomical position?
Close. It was close.
Okay.
Okay.
Was that surprising to you?
To see a mandible still retained on the bottom of the skull from a surface recovery, yes, that was surprising.
Why is that surprising?
Generally, there needs to be something there to hold the mandible in place. Just through gravity, the mandible will normally separate once the soft tissues are no longer present.
And based on your examination of this, what was holding the mandible in place in this circumstance?
From this examination would have been if we see from the picture that's still up there, it would have been the hair that had moved to the base of the skull.
Right. Was there anything else in the hair?
Well, we can see right in the picture here, there is some leaf litter and it looks like some roots that were there.
How about the tape? What did that have any involvement in holding the mandible into place that you could see?
No, because I think the tape was adhered to the hair, but I don't recall it holding the mandible in place in this view.
All right. During your examination of the initial bones that were brought in, did you find anything indicating evidence of any kind of trauma to the bones?
No, there was no evidence of trauma.
Now, did you participate in planning a thorough excavation of the site where the skull was found?
Okay. I provided an advisory role to the Sheriff's Department, but I would not call it an excavation because an excavation would interpret we were, normally we say excavation, we're out there with trowels and we're pulling back subsurface soil layers. In this instance, I would call this a recovery because the material primarily was not buried. There were some items, but for the majority of the material was underneath the leaf litter throughout the site.
All right. Now, what was the plan for recovery? How was that done?
Okay. I had, on the 12th, I arrived at the scene in the morning and talked with Susan Mears, who was the crime scene supervisor. And we talked about how to proceed with processing this type of scene. And this scene posed numerous difficulties because we were dealing with a small child. The bones are very small. The bones, during growth, many of the bones are in multiple parts. So we had additional parts of bones that we would have to consider. Some bones had not even properly, were not completely ossified yet. And it was a heavy, heavy wooded environment. Lots of surface plant material. So there are many issues we had to consider. And so we already knew where the primary area was where the skeletal remains were located. So what we decided was we would process the scene starting there. And what I instructed was everybody should be on their hands and knees. We need to be removing leaf litter. And we would be screening or double checking. All that material that was removed would go to a sifting station. So we started where the known material was and we worked out from there. It was kind of we talked about initially. And I worked the initial location where the skeletal remains were found. I felt it was best that I started that area with Susan Mears just because I was the one that would be identifying all of the bones that were found in the field.
Now, when you say, you use the word screening, what does that mean? How is that done?
Normally when we're doing a recovery or an excavation, all of the material that would be removed would be brought over to, essentially, we just like a screening box. It would be some type of mesh on the bottom of a box, and we would put all the material in there, and then there would be one or two people working each screen, and then they would thoroughly sift through all that material. And in this instance, the sheriff had set up, I think, a secondary area. Everything that was even sifted through was sifted through again.
Now, did you advise them to use a certain kind of mesh based on the kind of bones you were looking for?
Yeah, I told them to go to a smaller size screen. I mean, I think they had two sizes, and so I'd advise them that everything should be no larger than I think what standard chicken wire is. Off the top of my head, I can't remember what that size was.
Is that because of the
bones were so small? Correct. Yes.
All right. I've got some. Did you have photographs? Have you seen photographs that were taken of the process that you could explain to the jury, sort of how the process went?
Say that again, please.
I'm sorry, that was a very bad question.
Jesus Christ.
Are there photographs that you've reviewed that show the process of this recovery to help explain to the jury exactly how it was done?
Yeah, I know the sheriff's department, they were the ones in charge of taking all of
They're going to get in trouble and get scolded from Judge Belvin for talking over each other. I feel like it's just a matter of time.
photographs. Like I said, I was only there as an advisory role. I was not. Thank you.
Well, there's
I was
that.
only there as an advisory role, so I was not out at the scene the whole time, but we kind of set up a protocol with them, and they would
The thing
document.
is that, even though Mr. Ashton at the beginning of this examination said, oh, we'll remind you, don't worry about talking about, the thing is that he talks so fast and he talks over people and doesn't give them time. This is with every witness, right? He kind of cuts them off, and it's not like to be rude. It's like he's just in a real hurry, talks over them, and he talks really fast. So even if he's okay, we'll remind you, but then it's he goes to ask his next question. He's like, da, 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 right? And then when you've got another person who also naturally talks fast, I guess what I'm saying is he's not setting a good example, Mr. Ashton, right? Because he also talks really fast. So when you've got two people like that, then it just becomes like a ball rolling down a hill where it's picking up speed and then until it crashes, and then somebody says something, either Judge Belvin or the court reporter.
Different steps of the recovery with photographs. Were we seeing any photographs? Or
I'm going to show you some right now.
Okay.
If we could have for the witness States Exhibit EP for identification. Do you recognize this photograph, sir?
Yes, I think this one is sheriff initially set up the main area. They essentially put this, whatever you want to call it, tarp thing over here. They set up
Canopy.
over the main area. Excuse me?
Canopy.
Thank you. Yeah, canopy over the main area.
And that is was set up over the main area. You talk about the
It blows my mind he didn't know what to call that. Don't you use this every time you do a job? If you're a forensic anthropologist, looking for human remains, y'all know the first thing they do is they set that type of thing up. So even if you don't know, he's I don't know what to call it, a tarp thing. It's have you not seen that before? We know you were there for at least this day, but is this the only case you've ever been a part? It's very weird. But again, I just want to reiterate: while we're seeing photos, we're not going to see anything graphic. The cameras just don't show it. So
main area where the skull initially was found.
Correct, where the skull's initially found. But I could not tell you which day this is since I did not take the initial photograph. And I'm assuming it's the first day. But
why are
Does
we
this fairly
assuming?
accurately depict
don't
the
assume.
appearance of the process?
Why?
yes, this is where because in this instance, what we have is one of the crime scene supervisors.
Why is nobody stopping this? Why are we letting him assume? Hello? What?
Is just showing she's on her hands and knees, which is most of the time we are on our hands and knees because of small bones. They were laying flags out where items were located so they could later map them in. Yes.
Now, this mapping process, tell the jury how that worked.
Okay. I was not in charge of the mapping process. Normally what we would want to do is document the spatial relationships of where the items are found in the field, evidence. In this instance, the sheriff's department was mapping in a material that was found in the field. For me, they were also, mapping in all the skeletal remains. And so the whole process for them, there were multiple ways that we can actually map a scene. One of the best and most accurate ways is actually using a computerized transit, probably the total station unit. And this was part of the mapping process that was undergone by the sheriff's department.
And again, were you obviously not there every day, but monitoring the progress as bones were recovered?
Ron Murdoch, if I remember correctly, was in charge of using the total station, and he did talk to me. We did discuss how that was being done. Correct.
And when remains were found, would you examine them?
Yes, if I was there. So my role, not only to advise on the recovery and to assist with some of the recovery, I was also there every day that I was in town and available. I would go out to the scene and always assess what type of bones were found or suspicious material. The sheriff needed to have an idea of which bones that were located were actually human, because one of my jobs was to assess how we needed to expand the search. So if they were finding, let's say, non-human bones, I would be able to let them know. And when they found human bones, we would discuss what was going on, which material represented human bones. This is a big part of what was involved because of this environment and the small bones.
Did the search area progressively increase based upon what was found?
Correct, yes. As we initially started in the main area, additional CSIs worked south of us, all right, also searching. And as additional human remains were located, I would talk to Susan Mears and say, okay, we're locating remains in this area and we need to expand out further. We need to make sure. So we started with a smaller area, and that area kept expanding and expanding as additional bones were located.
Doctor, if you could just kind of explain to the jury what it is they're looking at here.
It hasn't changed. The image has not changed for me.
I know it won't. They can see it now. Just you could see it before, they can see it now.
Well, all I see still is the canopy picture.
That's what I want you to explain. When you were talking about it, they couldn't see it.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Okay.
Now that they can see it, explain what you...
That makes sense. All right. So what we're looking here is some of there are a lot of vines in the area, and like I said, I'm not sure which...
He has never testified before. Like, this is crazy. And even if you haven't testified before, though, like, how did no one walk you through what happens generally? Like, with the way evidence comes in. I have so many questions. Shout out to Flash, man. Happy to see you. This is just insane.
This picture is from. This is just showing some of the process. And some of the process had to involve removing some of the vines and some of the overgrown plant debris, tree debris. In this area, they set up a canopy over the initial area. And we can also see, we talked about how all the debris would be collected. So we would screen that debris, and you could see there are pails out there. That's what the pails represent. All right. So every time all of the people involved that were in the field removing material, all right, they'd be on their hands and knees. They would pick up that material.
Dude,
they would go through it, but there's always a possibility there could be some
hands and knees so many times. And all I can think about is all the various like rap songs and stuff like that reference hands being on knees. And anyway,
stuck to the plant debris, and then they would place it in a pail. And that's what they're just showing, where there were pails out there. And when items were located, they would place flags out there, and the flags would have the whatever number that item was given by the sheriff's department. They would document that with photographs. And because we're dealing with such small bones, the idea was we needed to remove those bones, but the flag was placed at the location where they were found, so it could be that location could be mapped later on.
Is it important in your eventual evaluation to know where particular bones are found and in what order? When trying to understand how the skeletal remains may have been dispersed and disarticulated at a site, you would definitely need to know where all of the skeletal remains were located. And if you could explain the word disarticulated.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Disarticulated would mean when the bones are separated from their natural position.
What's weird is that he's asking that question. We had another witness, I forget who it was in the last episode, who mentioned, they were talking about things being articulated and things being disarticulated. And Mr. Ashton never asked them to explain it. But I think the jury figured it out because of the context. And now here we are. They've already heard these terms, and now he's asking him to explain it. Great.
Articulation would occur at a joint, and then when the bone is separated at the joint.
All right. I'm going to unpublish to the jury and bring up State's Exhibit EQ. Do you recognize this photograph of the process? Again, just
and that's a picture just showing where the flags are being placed. My guess is there may have been some pictures taken at this point, but we see all of the flags representing where some of the items.
It's not. Hold on a second.
Y'all, can you tell? Look, the person's on their hands and knees. Hands and knees.
That's okay. Again, this is a picture showing that process.
Correct.
All right. You can describe it to the jury now that they. Hold on
Okay.
one
So
second.
this is a
Just 1 second. There's a delay. Okay. Now they can see it. Go ahead and explain it to them.
All right, this would be a close-up of, I'm assuming, the earlier picture we were looking at from a different angle. And this is just showing one of the CSIs, the one that was in charge of documentation.
Why will someone not tell him to not, they need to stop assuming. This is just not how it works. He has said this now. I mean, it's the second time I've pointed it out. I think he's probably said it more than that, but I've noticed it twice. Now I'm going to pay attention, but he's just said it again. I'm assuming that, like, how are you, like, oh my God. The photos that he's just mentioned, assuming things of, they're not in evidence yet. He is the witness to bring these in. And so in other words, when you think about like laying the foundation, right? Like there's a reason why a certain piece of evidence can come in only through a certain witness. You can't just take a piece of evidence and grab a different witness and then it's randomly stick the two together when they can't verify what the thing is. And that's what we have here, because it's like, I'm assuming it's blah, blah. I don't understand what's happening. I don't know why there's not any objections.
And my guess here is she was probably, you could see on her back, there's the camera, all right? And there are flags representing locations where items were found. And I'm having a hard time seeing the picture, but I think what she's actually doing is, it looks like in her left hand that she has one of the envelopes for evidence collection. So she's probably collecting.
If you want to wait 1 second, we can actually zoom in.
Okay.
Perez, can you zoom in on the individual in the photograph, please? Okay. So that's what you're referring to.
Yes. So the location, the flag, she would have wrote down the specific number that was assigned to that piece of evidence, and that's written on the flag. So that flag can be mapped in later on, but she's removing that evidence and placing it in the envelope.
And that was in fact done in this case. A mapping system was used in order to map where each bone was found.
Each bone and whatever evidence the sheriff collected, they were continually mapping everything in this process.
All right, thank you. Now, once bones would be found, and was part of your job to basically tell the sheriffs what was a bone and what wasn't?
Correct. And not only what was a bone, what wasn't, what was not a bone, what was non-human, and then what would be human bone.
All right. And those things that you identified as human bones would have then been transported to the medical examiner's office. Is that correct?
Yes. And I know they, I think maybe even some of the non-human stuff was probably already, because I wasn't there the entire time, so some of the other non-human bones may have already, that would have been transported, and we would have looked at those bones. I would have looked at those bones at the medical examiner's office as well.
Oh, all right. All right, Dr. Shultz, what are we looking at in this photograph?
We are looking at a number of vertebrae, so part of the spine. And what we can see here is the vertebrae are disarticulated, separated. They're not together anymore. There's no soft tissue. Thank you. There's no soft tissue. We can see roots growing throughout the vertebrae as well. And I would like to point out that because we're dealing with a child, and I mentioned earlier how when we grow, our bones do not grow as whole units. They grow in pieces to allow the growth. So what we can see here is all of these vertebrae, except for the furthest one on the right, they're in separate pieces. But what's very important about this picture, we can see here that in order for all
Doctor, let me stop for a second. If you want to, that's a telestrator screen.
Okay.
If you need to refer to something, you can just touch the screen and circle it, and it will make a
okay.
mark.
All right,
So-
thank you. All right, so I was saying the vertebra on the my right here, we can see the back of the vertebra, so this is the body. What's interesting from my perspective when we look at this image, here's a vertebra where the body's separated. All the other ones are separated. And all of these bones were found in one location. So it would have to tell you that these bones were transported while they were still held together. Not only all the vertebrae held together, but the parts of the vertebra held together with some soft tissue.
And was this particular set of bones found at a different location than the skull?
Yes, these were found at a different location.
And we'll discuss that more later, but that's significant in terms of how they got transported.
Correct.
This particular bone, again, we see a bone and then we see a manila envelope, I guess, with some writing on it. Is that what you were talking about, how each bone is documented as to where it came from?
Correct.
All right. This also indicates 6 inches deeper below large roots. That's how they would indicate where they found it?
They would have information on the bag. Now, on this one, I'm not sure, but this one may have actually been found in the sift. And what they were trying to do was locate where the person that recovered these remains was in the, what area of the site they were at.
All right. So this was actually covered in sifting, not something that was found.
I think so, because she says lane 5, but so that's what I think this may have been a sift bone.
All right. So you said this is a fragment from another bone.
Buzzwords. We had
Correct.
oh gosh, is Riemer doing that thing?
What are these bones that we're looking at in this exhibit?
Sorry, StreamYard was actually doing pretty well so far, and not being weird where it freezes on the video. But anyway, I was just gonna say we had a good streak there. We got, I think so. I'm not sure. I think so. Awesome.
We're looking at right now the largest bones in the body. Those would be the shafts of the femora. So those would be your lower leg bones that attach to the pelvis.
And does this, could we have a split screen between this and the last exhibit that we put in? Now, in your opinion, do these two bones relate to each other?
Yes, they do. If we look at the image with the 2 bones on the left, what we're looking at here, the top of the bones, these have actually been chewed on by animals. This bone here actually is a fragment that you can actually put right back into place there.
Okay.
Now, these particular bones, is there some significance to these bones that you would like to describe to the jury?
These bones represent part of the pelvis. So if you were to, with your hands, palpate your waist, you generally would be palpating the top area of your pelvis. So since we're dealing with a child, each one of these, they're called os coxa, would grow as 3 bones. And then through the maturity process, they would fuse. So what we're looking at are the top parts of each os coxa. This one here, we do have some carnivore damage on the bottom and some adipocere here as well.
And what is adipocere?
Adipocere would just be a conversion of fats in the body into essentially a wax.
Is, in your overall opinion of the taphonomy of this case, is where one of these bones was found significant?
One of these, yes, was found almost completely buried in the muck.
And that's, you're going to just explain later why that's significant.
Yes.
Okay. Which one of these was that?
Off the top of my head, I don't know. I'd have to check notes.
That's fine. Do you need to check your notes? Go ahead.
The left.
The left in this picture?
Yes. Okay. Generally, when we're covering a skeleton that's not only been dispersed at a site, but it's also been susceptible to dispersal from carnivore activity, even with an adult skeleton where bones are completely intact, it's very difficult to collect the majority of the skeletal remains. And it's also very difficult to to collect many of the teeth. I feel we were very, very successful here. We collected all but 1 tooth. We have most of the spine, many of the ribs, all the long bones, and then the tiny bones, hands, feet, left foot, and we did recover 1 bone of the right foot. The only reason we had 1 bone of the right foot because there was carnivore activity in that part of the skeleton.
And the only part missing is the...
For the most part, there are a few pieces here and there missing.
Take it down. We've had enough of that. So this 9-day effort, would you say that it was a successful effort in terms of your experience with this kind of recovery efforts.
But yes, I would say very successful in terms of what was recovered and mapping the location of all those bones as well.
And were you provided with the information and the mapping about where the various bones were?
Yes, Ronald Murdoch, one of the CSI supervisors of the Sheriff's Department, he was in charge of the mapping, and he had provided me with all the locations.
Right. And is that the type of information that you would normally utilize in coming to an opinion as to taphonomy and forensic anthropology?
When you say type of information, can you specify, please?
This is the type of information that you as an expert would normally use in coming to opinions.
Yes, we would need to know spatial relationships of all of the bones out at the site in relationship to the dump site, and we would want to have things mapped out.
Right. Now, Mr. Perez, if we could zoom in on this area. Let me clear the annotation. Now, Doctor, does this part of the survey essentially give us all of the areas where bones were found?
Yes, it does.
Okay. If you could just explain, and do you have a specific listing of what was found in each area?
In terms of the bones, yes.
Okay. Well, if you need to refer to that to refresh your recollection, just let us know you're doing it and go right ahead.
What I would like to do when I explain this is just provide a generalization of the different bones, not provide an itemized list because
Absolutely
it's
fine.
too long. Okay.
Just start with Area A. What is Area A?
Okay. Area A. Do I need to highlight here?
If you want to, you may.
Okay. Area A in the image here is going to be what we feel is probably most likely the primary depositional area. So where the body and mass of bags, the body being in the bags, was placed into the woods. This would have been where the initial separation of some of the body parts occurred, such as the skull, the arms, the lower limbs would have separated here. And then what we're able to do is, I walk through here, is talk about how the skeleton, as it was dispersed at the scene, we can follow along with which parts were actually separated at specific locations. And so if we look at when I was working with the Sheriff's Department, advising them on which areas to focus our efforts and how to expand, I initially started in Area A, and then we had people in Area B, not Area B, but south of Area A. So if we're looking at this picture, north would be the top of the image. So when we initially started with our search, I was with Susan Mears in Area A. The rest of the crime scene investigators were south of us. And as additional skeletal remains were found, we moved further south.
Okay, just one second. If you want to designate a new area of search, you can do it in a different color.
Well, I'm just doing a generalization, okay,
Right.
because this whole entire area was searched. So what I'm trying to say is, as we were in Area A, we also had people outside here working across this way. And then when this entire area was searched, what I would do is talk to Susan Mears, go through with her what the progress was for the day. We'd talk about where skeletal remains were located, and then we would talk about how to expand the search. So, for example, as Area F, Area G, more material was found, we kept the search progressed further south. All right, and as it was progressing south, what I did at that point was we talked in terms of where bones were located, and I said we needed to expand west and east, and that's how we located additional bones further out.
So was this a further progressive?
Yeah, so we want to start with the known and then progress out from the known and keep expanding till no more bones are located.
So once you got to a point where you weren't finding anything, then...
Well, when that whole area was completely cleared, okay, and cleared means surface debris, and even the ground was going to be scraped with trowels, all right?
And that was done over this entire area that you've...
Yes, yes. And the sheriff would be able to provide the exact location,
Sure.
all right?
Are they on their hands and
All
knees?
I was provided, I worked with Ron Murdoch to produce this map, and all I told him was I wanted the
It's
location.
still cutting it out. It should be fine now. It seems fine. I mean, I don't know. It could be that it's different on y'all's end. StreamYard's been a mess. So I don't know, but it looks like it's fine now. Also, this is an interesting face that we have here.
For where all the bones were found on a scene map where I could then talk about dispersal and what we're discussing now.
Very good. Let me
And
get
I
rid of
wanted to
your.
point out earlier too. I think I got distracted by StreamYard messing up, but that there was a part just recently where Mr. Ashton asked him a question about based on your experience and all of your experience at these types of scenes and blah blah whatever the case is, and then to make a statement based on that, right? I just wanted to point out how he called the canopy that they use at every crime scene when they're excavating a body, and he called it the Tarp Thing. And then also we had muck. We've had a lot of really, and then also it's obvious he has never testified as a witness in a trial. And so I'm wondering, was this the only scene he's been to? Maybe.
Annotations here for a moment. So,
oh yeah,
generally what was found in area.
Heard that correct. There is a Murdoch, no relation. And I'm not going to give it away with how it's spelled. It's going to be a surprise. And we will hear from this individual on the next episode. And believe me, how excited I got when I was editing the video and I heard the name. I was like, oh my God. And then I got to see how it was spelled. And it was crazy. So we do have a Murdoch coming in the next episode.
Area
No
A.
relation.
As
Okay.
far as
Okay. Area
skeletal
A.
remains.
Area A would have been. Sorry.
There it is.
Just a
Yep.
second.
I knew it. Yep.
You cannot talk at the same time.
Oh, do you remember 20 minutes ago or something when I made a prediction? You guys remember? I made a prediction. And the prediction that I made was at some point, these two are going to get scolded by Judge Belvin for talking over each other. It was the squirrely crystal ball moment.
There's a question.
Here we
Let there
go.
be a break, then let there be a moderate, deliberate answer. If not, the court reporter will not be able to take a thing down and the record will be shot.
And
Proceed.
again,
Yes, sir.
I don't
So
blame
tell-
the witness so much as I blame Mr. Ashton, because Mr. Ashton does this worse than anybody. He's done this with every single witness. And it's just like a train wreck.
Tell us, if you will, what skeletal remains were found in Area A.
Area A was the initial area where they located the skull, the bags, where additional bones that were found there. As a generalization, the arms with hand bones were found there. The lower legs were also found there with the left foot.
How about Area B, the area closest to A? What was found there?
Left B was the shaft for the upper arm bone, the humerus.
All right. And the next closest, I guess, would be the biggest area, Area F. What was found there?
As we progressed further, I guess that would be a southeastern direction. In Area F, what we can see happened here, the trunk of the body with the pelvis and the lower legs more than likely was dragged to this area, because what we see only in this area, we see primarily there are some additional bones, but we do find both lower leg bones and part of the pelvis, and some other bones are located here as well.
And those would be a connected anatomical unit.
Yes, so at this point we probably have being dragged away from Area A by an animal or animals would be the trunk with the lower, both femora attached to the pelvis, still all articulated.
All right. What further dispersal can you describe for this diagram?
Okay. Well, I just wanted to point out Area D. All right. That's the area where we had only located one bone.
This is over to the far left of the diagram. Is that correct?
Yeah, and that's the only bone we found for the right foot, and that did exhibit carnivore damage, which documented what we believe clearly was going on at this site. That Area D, animals had dispersed, and we said then we go back to Area E. We didn't talk about Area E. That was a hand bone found there.
Let me ask you one question before about Area D before you get off that. You said that was the one bone. Is that the one bone of the foot that no other bones were found?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Okay, so go ahead. You were going to, I think, Area E. Is that what's the next one you're talking about?
Yes, Area E was just one hand bone.
That's off here in the top of the picture. That's Area E.
Correct. Yes, that's Area E.
Okay. You told us about area F. How about area G?
Okay. If I could just explain further, area F
Sure.
is where, area F is where we did see carnivore damage on multiple bones. And area G, all right, at this point, area G, we more than likely had most of the spinal column, so most of the vertebrae still together with many of the ribs attached. And what we see separating out at this area would be the bottom of the spinal column or the lower vertebrae that would have separated here.
And that's in area G?
Correct, area G.
Again, is that consistent with, again, an animal moving?
Yes,
that
yeah, still be consistent. Like I said, there was damage to the pelvis area. That part of the spinal column would attach to the pelvis, make a part of the pelvis.
How about area H?
Area H, we start to see more of the ribs that are disarticulated or separated at this point. Okay, and so ribs, there are some other little bones, but I'll just, if I just use a generalization, like
Yes.
I said I would.
Sure. How about area I? I guess is the last one we.
Yes, area I, at this point, we have not, up until area H, we haven't seen most of the spine. So what's interesting about area I is, if we start at the top of the spine, we first have the cervical vertebra, 7 of those. Then we go to the thoracic vertebra, 12. And then we go to the lumbar vertebra, 5. So that's 24 vertebra. If we go to area I, we found 20 of the vertebra there. So this would be consistent at this point as the trunk is being dragged through the woods. The bones that are not held on with as many potential ligaments. There's going to be more ligaments helping to support the spinal column to hold it together. So it's consistent with that part of the spinal column being dragged while it's relatively articulated. And as I mentioned earlier, almost all of these vertebra may even be 2 parts because they have not fused yet due to growth. So it's consistent with this potentially as a whole anatomical unit, a whole block being dragged to area I where decomposition would have occurred, continued there, finished.
In order for that to occur, would it be correct that the skeleton would not have to be completely skeletonized? There had to be some tissue connecting these bones in order for them to be moved as a unit.
Yes, there would have had to have been some tissue holding the bones together, correct.
Have we covered all the areas now? I think we have.
Yes, we spoke about all the areas.
All right. Now, based upon this dispersal pattern, do you have an opinion as to whether this body was deposited in area A as a complete intact unit?
It may have been relatively intact. I don't know exactly if it was a complete unit because it would have been in the bags, but it would have been, we still would have had, if we look clearly at area F, clearly the trunk and lower legs would have still been all articulated. I couldn't tell you if all the other parts, whether or not they had separated yet, the ones that were found in the locations closer to the road.
Just so we're clear, there's no indication that the body was dismembered by using any kind of tool or anything like that.
No, we did not. We did not see any evidence.
Right. Whatever separation occurred was through the natural process of decomposition.
Correct. Would have been natural.
Now, based upon the dispersal pattern, and there's one particular bone that we talked about, the hip bone, and I forget what your technical term for it was that we talked about in one photograph. You said was buried in something. Can you explain to the jury what the significance of the way that bone was found is to your...
Given this dude's track record, I wouldn't be surprised if his quote-unquote technical term was thingamabobber.
ultimate opinion about taphonomy?
So Flashman's asking if I'd be willing to do Menendez. So my understanding, and I've thought about this, my understanding is that there's only, there were only cameras for the first trial, right? And like that, the footage is terrible. And I remember I looked into it and it was pretty bad. And so that would be the kind of the thing. I remember kind of looking at it and thinking, I don't think it's really going to be all that worth it. I don't remember though the audio quality, because sometimes that matters more. But I'll definitely consider it. I'm very interested in that case, and I know that people had really strong feelings about that attorney. Again, I don't know much about her. I just know the general overview of the case, but yeah, that might be interesting to look into for sure.
When trying to interpret how long the bones may have been at the site and also how they were dispersed.
Okay. You may continue.
Actually, before he answers, I realize I have not go through the formal process. I would ask the court to recognize the witness as an expert in the area of forensic anthropology.
So this is ridiculous. So what happened was there was some objection, right? I don't know. The thing that happened was that Mr. Ashton is not on his game today, and he forgot to try to admit this witness as an expert, because as we know, there's things they can do. They can rely on hearsay. They can rely on other people's opinions. They can actually, like, they can kind of speculate, not really, but to a certain extent. And there's other things as well. So they they have other things they can do. Now, the reason this is also really crazy to me is because this dude clearly, with his terminology or lack thereof, and his like maybe one time, and having said that, the pictures he's been talking about, he has actually said, I wasn't here this day. So far, we don't really know that he was even ever there. It sounds like he's kind of describing what other people did. So I was going to say, was this his maybe one and only time he ever has done this? But actually, I don't even think we know for sure that he actually has done this at all. So interesting to submit him though or offer him as an expert witness, right?
Give opinions in the area, though he's already done that. I've never formally requested, so I would at this time.
Yeah, I did check.
Any objections, Mr. Mason? The witness will be accepted as an expert witness in the areas tended by the prosecution.
Thank you. So explain to us about this particular bone and its significance in your opinion.
Ilium?
Yes,
Okay.
the ilium, the left ilium.
Here's the thing. So the defense didn't object. Now, this could be strategic, right? Because if sometimes this comes back to bite you, like we saw this in the Murdoch trial where Mr. Barber didn't object to that law enforcement officer during the state's rebuttal case being offered as an expert. But that was different because he just wasn't paying attention. Had he been paying attention, it would have happened, because that dude, they brought him in to do the throwing the phone thing, right? In this case, this could be strategic because you want to obliterate somebody. Now, this defense attorney who is objecting, that means we know he will be doing the cross-examination. And he's not been a fan favorite so far this trial. I include myself in that category. However, one thing I will say is that Judge Belvin seems to really respect him. And I don't know if it's because he's like an old school dude or whatever, but you guys will notice there is a difference in the amount of objections of this defense attorney when he's the objecting party, that there's more objections that are sustained, and that vice versa when the attorney, this defense attorney is doing cross-examination, that the state's objections aren't just always that they are sustained. Wait, is that what I meant to say? Did I just get myself confused? No, sorry, that they are overruled. Like, in other words, he treats this defense attorney more fair. But what's crazy is there's such a contrast. You guys will see there's such a contrast between how he treats this defense attorney versus like Mr. Baez. It's pretty crazy. And so all that to say that whether it's because he's not stifled at every turn by, the state making objections and those objections getting sustained, what I think is interesting is that he ends up taking a lot of these witnesses when it comes to these medical, doctors. He ends up taking a lot of these witnesses. And it's interesting because he's not taking that many witnesses this trial, but when he's taken them, it was like, he took like some lay witnesses and I was like, But I tell you what, as I was editing these videos, I was really impressed with his cross-examinations of some of these medical experts. And I wonder if that's, sometimes it's like the, different attorneys, they have their forte, if you will, right? There are certain, you want to put certain people, certain witnesses. And I wonder if this is like, some something I mean, Mr. Baez is great too. So that's the other thing. But what I will say too is that if you take, Mr. Baez, who's phenomenal always, in my opinion, and then you take this other defense attorney whose name I don't remember at this juncture, but the one with the really strong accent, and you look at, but then if you add in the fact that Judge Belvin seems to like this defense attorney, and, that changes things because he's able to actually ask questions he wants to ask and whatnot, and that can change the trajectory of the cross-examination. So.
When trying to interpret the dispersal at the scene, and
thank you for that background info, or insider info. Yeah, that makes sense. Jose Baez's book says that they were friends, the defense attorney and the judge. Okay, that makes sense. That makes sense because it's very different. And in fact, he gets Judge Belvin gets a little bit snippy with Mr. Ashton sometimes when Mr. Ashton makes these certain objections, but it's only with this one defense attorney. When Mr. Ashton gets all snipe, what was the word I was using? Gets all, persnickety with Mr. Baez, it just lets go for it. Have at it. It's really interesting.
And
I mean,
how long the skeleton may have been out at the scene. Many of the bones were located underneath the leaf fall. So that would let us know that the bones had to have been there prior to the leaf fall. And then we had, particularly with this ilium, the bone was nearly buried. So that would at least have to tell us, more than likely, this area was, I guess simplest way to may say it was a swampy area. There was water south or southeast. And so it's quite possible that when the area was filled up with water, the whole area was flooded, that as somehow the action from the water, silt, or other material that may have been suspended in the water may have resulted in the burial of this particular bone, which would have occurred sometime over the summer.
Now, when you say buried, can you describe more how you mean how it was done? Was it deep down in the dirt? Was it just in the muck? How was it?
Okay, it was close to a big palmetto trunk, and which was one of the lower areas. I cannot give you an exact measurement, but I know area F. If we looked at the topographic map, that is the lowest area. So more than likely, when the whole trunk was brought in there, that is one of the bones with carnivore damage. Somehow it was deposited in that particular location. And there's going to be silt and other material suspended in water as water moves, be picked up, and that process would have eventually led to almost burying this bone.
Now, based upon all of this evidence that you've seen here, that you've discussed, do you have an opinion as to the taphonomy in this case, as to approximately how long you believe these remains were in that area?
Okay. When we're trying to interpret time since death, we're going to use, like I was talking about, multiple lines of evidence. This is one of the reasons why we want to document the location of all the bones, trying to understand the dispersal. And overall, the bones were dry, all right, which would suggest it dry, not only completely free of soft tissue, but dry. Bones are all going to have marrow in them. There's going to be fat in them. So even when the tissue first decomposes off the bones can still have a moist touch. There can also still be decomposition odor. So these bones were completely dry. They were not, no decomposition odor. There was some slight erosion on many of the bones, which would take time. Found under the leaf litter, one bone was practically buried. In combination of that with some of the root evidence, what I pretty much said in my report, it would not be a period of around 6 months could be possible.
All right. And is it your opinion, based upon, again, the examination of this, that the dispersal of the bones was a result of animal activity?
He said 6 months. From the time Caylee went missing And the time she was found, it was only 5.5 months. So how the heck is she supposed to have been in the woods for longer than she was even missing total, when we know the state's theory of the case is that she was in that trunk at some point first? I mean, their theory is really not clear and isn't making a lot of sense. And you know what? This isn't helping. How, dude? Okay.
I would say primarily result of animal activity when we're finding animal activity directly on the bones in some of these areas. And I don't, off the top of my head, I need to look at my report, at least on one of them. I mean, there was some animal chewing even on a couple of the ribs that we did know. And, that's one thing, this area was processed.
So I will say, Flash fan, since you're here, and I know I love that you're such a trial fan and you're suggesting trials. So here's one thing that's interesting, and you may have already known this. I'm a violin teacher, right? I teach private violin lessons. I've been doing that forever. I've been playing violin forever. All of my degrees are in music. And so I actually have some news that I haven't actually shared. You're going to be the first to know, as far as, people on YouTube and in the squirrel community. So, I had been toying with the idea for a long time. Well, okay. Like, even after I finished my master's degree in music, I toyed with the idea of like going to law school, and like, I thought it's always been something that like, and it's funny because my dad had a PhD actually in music, and he actually went to law school when he was like in his 40s at UNC Chapel Hill. And anyway, there's a lot of similarities and a lot of overlap between law and music. And I think it uses similar parts of the brain in similar ways. And I think that's why it makes sense, like to love to, anyway. So that being said, of course, y'all know I've been doing, covering trials, and I think you guys can tell I do a lot of research. I've done a lot of studying on my own, but additionally, I've actually earned a paralegal certificate, which I did, well, mostly for the knowledge and for fun, because I love learning, but also just in the event that I wanted to kind of keep it in the back of my head. Do I want to like actually kind of like maybe pursue a career in law, and the thing is that with my teaching with my students, I have the flexibility there because I'm, it's my studio. And so I can, I have control over that, and it gives me that ability to, condense certain days or, whatever the case is. So anyway, so all that being said, that I just, on Monday had my first day working at a law firm, believe it or not. And, so what the dealio is that I'm going to be working at the law firm, like during the day, and then I'm 40 hours a week. So it's going to be kind of crazy. And so I'm condensing my lessons, into when I'm not there. So evenings and weekends. And then I'm still fitting in, and so far it's happening, right? It's happening right now. Like for example, today, I got up super early. I went to my new job, and then I came back. I got home at like 7:00, and then I took care of my dog Frodo, and then went right into lessons. And then my lessons ran over, and then I went straight into the live stream. So anyway, but my point is that like, this is going to be a feat, because now I'm juggling. So far, I'm trying to keep all my students. So like, with however busy I've been, which, was busy with all the stuff. I've just added on top of it a 40-hour a week job. And so far I've not cut back anything else. How are we doing this? I don't quite know yet. I'll let you know when I figure it out. But I'm still covering this trial, gavel-to-gavel, plus Karen Reed, plus Kohberger. And there's a lot going on in Idaho with Kohberger. So what I will say is that whatever, if I'm going to, I'm sure I will, another vintage trial, right? That will happen after this one. So like, as for like the suggestions, like Menendez or this trial out of Georgia, these are great suggestions. I can't add them to the plate now because I would need to clone myself a million times over. But I do like the idea of having an ongoing gavel to gavel. I mean, if you want to call it vintage, but a trial that's not current, right? For Karen Reed, Koberger, obviously they're happening right now. But a trial like that where we can kind of watch it at our own pace. People may or may not be familiar with it, but I really like that. And there's also a nice element of predictability because these cases were trials where everything's already done, so it's not like all of a sudden there's something new that happens and then it's like you feel like you have to kind of like drop everything, which is really the case with Karen Reed and with Brian Koberger, and I'm happy to do it. And and I'm really lucky at this law firm because they're really on top of things. Like, they're doing an awesome job in the sense that, like, you do your work, but then when you don't have work, you can kind of do other things. So, like, for example, if I don't have work that needs to be done, then it's like, I can pull up and check, like, on the docket. Did anything else come in Idaho? I mean, technically, I haven't done it yet, but I'm sure I could even like work on timestamps and stuff like that. Like, it's really ideal. And there's a lot of opportunity there for me to move up and into like higher positions and stuff. And, we'll see. I mean, who knows? Maybe at some point here in the near future, I will finally stop talking or joking about going to law school, and maybe I will actually go. But in the meantime, and thank you so much for the congratulations. This is awesome because, like, for me, it's like, I'm only going to be learning more, right, about the law and just to better help you guys if I'm answering questions. I mean, a lot of you guys have seen a lot of trials, but there are times when people do ask good questions or whatever. And so anyway, and because of the teacher in me, right, that's my nature. Even if people aren't asking questions, I'm going to stop and explain things. I can't help it. And but it's just going to give me more experience, right? Because, like, the only thing that I would love more is to be like an actual attorney, like other people on LawTube are like actual attorneys. And so while that is potentially still in the future, this is at least a step in that direction to where, I have knowledge and I have experience and whatnot. So, oh, interesting. Yeah. Definitely, anything like that, just as we get close to the end of this trial, that's when I'll start talking about what do you guys want me to do next? And then just, that would be a great time to mention that. I don't know if it was you or someone else, but somebody had mentioned the staircase. And that one, I think it was when I had already started covering this trial, because here's the thing. That's a North Carolina trial. And I have never covered a North Carolina trial. And what's really funny is just the other day, EDB was on and I had it playing in the background. I was doing other things, of course, as always. These days, it's like if I'm going to watch any trial or watch, without me covering it or watch anyone else breaking down something trial related, it's on in the background as I'm doing usually timestamps on one video and then on a separate device editing another video and probably other things as well. It's crazy. But anyway. But what's funny is that somebody actually asked EDB and they were like, have you ever covered a North Carolina trial? And she said she hadn't. So it's not just me. EDB hasn't covered a North Carolina trial either. And, just like with, it's just wild, right? With Ezra McCandless, right? I was the first person to cover the trial gavel to gavel and provide, commentary analysis. Same thing with this trial. And this is the same would be true with the oh my God, I just blanked on his name. Is it Scott Peterson? Yeah, Scott. It's just crazy that there's two of them. No, Michael Peterson. Sorry, Michael Peterson. Same would be true with that one. No one's done it, but what a great way to get, I'm just thinking about the opportunity it would provide me to really delve into North Carolina specific case law and statutes. And now I actually have at my disposal a whole wealth of like a law library and all kinds of stuff. And I think it would also just be amazing, being that I'm in North Carolina and nobody's, there's not a lot of televised trials out of North Carolina. But, you know, I've been representing for these other trials, these undercovered, if you will, trials, not undercover, but like no one's covered them trials. I would be really honored to do that for my home state. Yeah, that is a great name. Oh, that was you. Okay, cool. Yeah. And it was another, you know, the thing about that trial, you know, is that was another one where there's a lot of people who really mean, well, okay, I will say, when that documentary came out, I saw the documentary on Netflix. I don't remember what year that was. That might have been before I started really watching live trials. Like, I discovered my love for watching live trials. Like, I always loved the law, but like I normally found out, you know, I normally was watching things through like documentaries and stuff like that. I didn't even know live trials existed on YouTube or were a thing that you could just watch until I saw my first one, and I never looked back. That was it. It's like, this is all I need. And that was it was during COVID, and it was the trial of Derek Chauvin. That was the trial. And so anything that happened before that, I didn't know that you could just watch the live trial. And I'm thinking that this is one of those things because I watched the Netflix documentary. Had I known there was a trial and had already started watching trials, I would have just watched that instead. But my point being that from what was presented in the Netflix documentary, there's a lot of controversy over his guilt or innocence, which is always interesting, right? That a lot of people think he's factually innocent. And, you know, there's been a lot of recent cases where that's come up. So, yeah, I know. Well, that's what I was saying. Flash fans echoing what I was saying, that no one's ever covered it. Yeah. I mean, I thought maybe potentially the court TV videos could be on YouTube, but I mean, I know no one's ever covered it. Same thing with Ezra and same thing with this trial. But the fact that it's not even on YouTube just with the trial, like, you know, insane to me. But the documentary was like famous and viral. Like everyone, if you say, oh, the staircase, they're going to know exactly what documentary that is. You know what I mean? But if you say Michael Peterson, North Carolina trial, most people probably wouldn't even have any idea what that is. But these are things that we will consider. I mean, we're still in the state's case in chief, and they're still getting through. And it's wild because they're going through, again, all these multiple doctors, the multiple medical examiners. And it's like, they go through all that. And then it's like, I think this is going to be the next episode or maybe the one after. But then it's like, it switches gears. They bring in like some random tattoo artist. And then it's like back to like these experts. This is just so weird. I will say I'm so looking forward to the defense's case in chief. I can't wait to see how they do it. It's going to be, I will say, I have absolutely no concern saying that. I haven't seen any of it yet, right? But I feel very confident saying it's going to be fantastic.
Very well. They're all missing bones, and they were, in this instance, taken away by animals. You know, they could have been chewed and nothing left of the bone after that.
No further questions.
Cross-examination.
You ready?
Yes.
Okay. Now,
Now remember what I said, guys. This is where this attorney, I've not liked this attorney its entire trial. It was real. I love it when I prove myself, or like when something proves me wrong, right? Where I have to change my opinion. Because so far, this guy's rubbed me the wrong way. And I love being like, wow, I was wrong. Because again, he does a really, this is just my personal opinion, but he does a really good job with these cross-examinations coming up on these next handful of episodes when it's going through these experts. And he really impressed me. Like, this is his thing. And I love the way he started that. Let's watch that again. See, this tactic, it's like he would do this with like, you know, one of those like lay witnesses, like the 20-year-old girls or whatever that just met Caylee once. And it's like one of those witnesses where it's like, why did the state call them? I don't know. It makes no sense. And he would start out with something like this, and it's like, felt really not good, right? But in this situation, it feels good.
No further questions.
Cross-examination.
You ready?
Yes.
Okay. Now, as a forensic anthropologist,
I just love that. I love that. That's right, Mr. Mason. That's right. Now I remember it. Thank you for reminding me. Yeah, I would have looked it up, but we were talking. Oh right, that's a good point. Right. Yeah. He's on his A game for a lot of these witnesses that we're going to be seeing here coming up. Well, that's funny. He's the Georgian.
amongst the things you do is not only help or direct the location of bones, but you examined the bones yourself.
Correct.
And did you, in fact, x-ray bones?
The bones were x-rayed.
So not by him.
Something you directed?
We normally, when I work a case, I will always ask, okay,
Not normally. Dude, he's not answering the question. It's not what do you normally do? It's did you do it in this
do we
case?
have these x-ray views? And if not, I will ask for them.
In your examination of the bones and the x-raying of the bones, sir, isn't it true you found no evidence of any pre-mortem trauma?
No, there was no evidence of perimortem trauma.
Meaning no prior childhood broken bones, fractures, any such thing?
Are you asking antemortem trauma?
I'm sorry?
I'm not sure if your question, if you were asking, did we find, you asked me, I think you asked me two separate questions.
All right. Well,
Okay. Go ahead.
let me start over. Sometimes the acoustics in here are weird, and I
Okay.
can't hear well anyway. So, you found no evidence of any fractures, correct?
No evidence of fractures.
And no evidence of any twists or torquing of bones?
No, no evidence.
No evidence of anything to indicate to you that this child had ever had any traumatic injury whatsoever before her death?
No evidence.
That sounds like that just reminds me of an oldie but a goodie. Not that old, but it is good.
There's no evidence of anything in this case.
It's so wild that we don't hear from Lolly anymore, and he just sits there like a potato during those hearings. So crazy. He just sits there like a potato.
Too small for me to attempt to read, sir. Would you look at it? Can you tell us how far area A was from the pavement of the road, Suburban Drive?
If I use the scale, like I said, I did not do the mapping, but if I use the scale on the mapping without having a ruler in front of me, I would think 25 to 30 feet maybe
Area
to the edge of the road, right?
You know where I think this is going?
A, did you participate?
You know where I think this is going? I hope I'm wrong. Where I think this might be going is that nobody measured. And now we're getting into, wait a second, hold on. It's like Karen Reed all over again, right? Because there's been some really weird comments and statements made all throughout this trial, but I didn't. And I've been having that thought, but I'm like, there's no way. There's just no way that happened. There's no way that happened. And so every time that I have that thought, I'm like, did they not measure? I'm like, no. You just stop. Just don't be crazy. Like, there's no way. But I'm getting that feeling again based on the way that this witness is answering questions when it comes to measurements. And I'm wondering, because I know that there's a witness, again, just thinking of up ahead, this isn't a spoiler or anything, but I know they do have a witness who does some sort of fancy software thing and like 3D mapping of stuff or whatever. And I feel like the point of that is to try to create measurements. And it would make a whole lot of sense if they brought that person in, the state, of course, because no one measured anything at the actual scene. And so then they had to be like, oh, we don't have any measurements. And so now let's use some software and try to recreate it and measure it, which even with today's technology, everyone knows that does not suffice. That's not okay. Let alone the technology in 2011. I hope I'm wrong. Again, just like I love being proved wrong, right? I hope I'm wrong. State, prove me wrong. Please tell me that you people measured the scene out there. I hope I'm wrong.
I did not, no, I said that earlier. I did not document the measurements. The measurements were collected with a total station, and they also had a 3D scanner.
So this map only shows different elevations and lines that would show the elevations?
Yes, and the total a 3D scanner was brought in, and that's why I said earlier, I did not do the measurements. My job was not the mapping.
Right.
Measurements were provided to me.
And like, that's another reason, right? That's what, again, why did I keep getting that feeling of a red flag? Because he kept saying, even when it wasn't part of the question, I heard him say it a number of times where it's like this disclaimer. It's like, I didn't do the measurements. And it's really funny because like they didn't prepare him at all for his testimony. This was a mess. But like I think they told him one thing. And I think the one thing they told him was, make sure you say that you didn't take the measurements. And so he's like, note to self, say that. And so then he like inserted it an abnormally and weird number of times, even when it didn't really make sense. It's like, you only need to say that once on direct, right? Anyway, but like he, given that he has like no experience in testifying, that really just seemed like they told him to say that. And then he's like, okay, here we go. This is my job, right? He's like, I don't understand what publishing to the jury is, but like, make sure you say that you didn't take the measurements. And then here he is trying to lean back on that again.
Who provided the measurements to you?
Ronald Murdoch. Ronald Murdoch. And he didn't, what he provided to me was, he didn't necessarily provide.
Yeah, so the Susan Smith stuff, I didn't get to watch that hearing. I was really swamped when that hearing was happening. I think it's when I was like, you know, interviewing for this job and whatnot. Like I was really swamped and I was doing a lot. I was just doing a lot at once. I remember being especially swamped to where every time I would get a notification on my phone that these, you know, somebody was going to cover this hearing, you know, in 30 minutes or whatever, it was like, you know, my phone was just like a mess with all the different things I had going. And then I had the computer and the tablet. Anyway, didn't watch the hearing. So I don't feel like I should weigh in on that because I didn't watch it yet. So, and at this point, I feel like it's, you know, I know she wasn't granted parole, you know, so.
Measurements. The way that map was created, him and I looked through all of the data points for each of the flags. And then I came up with the different locations based on the concentration of bones. And then that map was created for me.
Okay, so when I ask you if you know specifically how far the beginning of area A and where the skull was from the edge of the pavement, you can't tell me.
If you give me a ruler, I could.
Oh my God.
Oh, fresh out. Okay. Do you know, sir, when the disbursement took place?
I'm not sure I understand the question when you say when.
Well, we start with area A. And area A, you say, was the primary site where the skull, the bags, arms, hand bone, lower leg bone, and so forth are located, right?
Yes.
Okay. And all of those items were in bags, right?
Originally, yes.
Originally, before you had to reconstruct it and set it out as you did in the exhibit.
Well, I would assume when I say in bags, originally when deposited out at the site.
Okay. And from the site was gathered the plastic bags, the laundry bag, the skull with bones in it. You know that. You saw it.
Correct.
All right. But the other areas where there were some bones or fragments, there were no bags, correct?
No bag. Well, excuse me. No bags. I could not tell you parts of bags. That I could not tell you since that was not my job to analyze that material.
So then the majority of what would be found and in a bag and so forth was all area A, right?
Can you repeat that?
The majority of the skull and the bones that we talked about, the majority of it was in the bags from area A.
I wouldn't necessarily say majority, and I would say found in the area. What you're referring to, I would say correct. The majority of that skeleton material was found in the area of A.
And it was only after inspecting the content of the remains from area A that you discovered there's missing bones. Right?
I don't know. I wouldn't agree with that because we would too when we started processing the scene. We did have people in other areas of the scene we were processing at the same time. And people were locating additional bones in south of area A before we had area A completely processed.
The initial find was area A.
Correct.
Okay. Then after looking what you got, then you spread it out. You drew a map.
Remember, guys, I just want to reiterate. This is the first of the state's forensic anthropologists. There are at least 2. There might be 3. I don't remember exactly because they just bring in so many. and they spread them out with other things in between. So this is going to come up again. What Mr. Caylee is doing right now is he is going ahead and laying down this, it's not foundation, because he doesn't have to lay foundation, right? That's the state that's doing that right now, and they're trying to admit evidence, but laying the foundation, in terms of figuratively, of like getting the jury to pay attention to this whole thing about where were the bones found in what area, and the thing about the measurements. This is all I'm just it's like I'm telling you, we just know this is going to come up again whenever they come back with their second forensic anthropologist who will be on the next episode. It's because what they're going to do is this state is going to try to build on what this guy said, which I don't even really know what all, he said muck and what was it, tarp thingy, things of that nature. Anyway, but same thing with the defense, right? Just as how the states brings in witnesses and they're trying to build on the previous witness with the next witness, it's debatable how successful they are being at that, but the defense is doing the same thing, but with the opposite argument, right? But they're doing the same thing. And they've been doing a masterful job this entire trial of that, in my opinion.
You said, go east, go south, go west.
We had a whole crew of people, so we separated them out in different areas, and we were searching simultaneously.
And that's when some found different bones and little pieces, as you have shown us.
Yes.
And then brought them back, and you did your best to reassemble the skeleton.
Correct.
Yeah. You don't have any scientific evidence to tell us when the first disbursement from Area A occurred, do you?
I cannot provide you a specific time period, no.
And same question as to areas B, C, D, E, F, G, and I.
Yes.
And there's nothing in your work, and in this case, that tells you how this child died. Isn't that correct, sir?
That's not a question that I would answer, and I did not. All I would look for would be perimortem trauma,
right.
and we did not find any perimortem
He's
trauma.
right about that.
And when you studied some of the remains and looked at duct tape, you did, right?
On the skull, I did not analyze it. I looked at the duct tape on the skull, but I did not look at and analyze the duct tape itself.
And duct tape was not covering the nasal aperture, was it, sir?
No.
Thank you very much, Your Honor. I have no further
So
questions.
this whole thing with the duct tape, guys, I've pointed it out before. There's this duct tape, the stupid duct tape. It's been a theme in the trial, just like the stupid gas can. But there's a lot of hinting at what's the deal with this duct tape, and it looks like where the state is kind of going with this is trying to say that the duct tape suffocated Caylee, which is odd, and that's why we've had this poll going on, right? We've had this poll going on because if they think the duct tape is what is the cause of death, then what is the whole deal with the chloroform? Because how many witnesses have they brought in to try to talk about the chloroform? That's the majority, I feel of what we've heard this entire trial has been about the chloroform, building up to the chloroform searches, and then all the different experts. And it's what they found, and the defense, of course, cross-examined, and it wasn't maybe all what it was made out to be, and by which I mean they pretty much just destroyed it. And maybe that could be why now the state is oh, duct tape. Save us, duct tape. So in regards to that, the next episode is called The Magic Duct Tape. So just have that to look forward to. Oh my God, what had just happened? Oh, it went full screen. Hold on. Okay, here we go.
Redirect.
What's a nasal aperture?
Nasal aperture is the hole on the skull where the nasal area would be.
So it's what, if you took everything else away, the opening where the nose would be.
Correct. If you were to remove the nose, the nasal aperture would be that hole. Correct.
And the tape wasn't covering the entire nasal aperture. Is that what you said?
The tape was covering the mouth area.
The mouth area.
Yeah.
Do you know whether the tape was in a position where it would have covered the nose had it been there, or do you just don't know?
Possibly, but based on what I saw, there was no way to say that exactly.
Okay. Because not to be indelicate, the nose wasn't there anymore.
Correct.
Mr. Mason asked you a question and may use the word the majority of the bones be in one place or another. If you could circle on this, what bones were found in Area A to the best of generally?
And this is not an exact?
Sure.
Okay.
Just in general.
Yeah, so we have skull area here. This was not, but we had some of the bones in here.
Just in a general sense.
Yeah, I mean, that's a general.
All right.
Oh, I'm sorry. Excuse me. Let me look here. I forgot here. Sorry about that.
Should be.
And we may have something here. I'd have to refer specifically to notes. One of the fibula may have been there, but
That's fine. So generally, that's what was in Area A.
Like, that's fine. I don't care
Correct.
what fibula.
when I put the X on the left humerus, before I said that was not there because that was located.
That was in the area closest to
Yes,
Area A.
yes, close by.
Sorry. That was in Area B, the closest to Area A. Correct.
Yes, that would be correct.
Right. What was in Area F? That was the larger area on the diagram.
Area F, it appears a little larger because the dispersal was out a little further. But in Area F, we do have the clavicles, which are your collarbones. And then we have parts of the pelvis and the proximal ends of both femora, okay, the shafts. And we do have some ribs. And one part of a vertebra.
That's in Area F. Correct?
Yes.
All right. What parts do we have in Area G?
Area G, what we see in Area G is that's where we see some separation of the bottom or distal end of the spinal column there. And then Area G, we had a couple ribs.
Okay. How about Area H?
Area H, we only had one part of one rib. Excuse me, part of one vertebra, sorry. And then we had a bunch of ribs, and I don't have exact ones in
That's
front of me.
fine. And how about Area I?
Area I, we see more ribs, but I don't have the exact vertebra, but we had close to 20, we had 20 parts representing 20 vertebrae.
No further questions.
Any recross as to those issues?
No, sir.
May the doctor be excused.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, doctor. You may be excused, sir.
Thank you.
My name is Dr. Jan Garavaglia, Garavaglia.
Here we
May I
go.
proceed?
You may proceed.
Is
Good morning, doctor.
This is big. So this is the celebrity medical examiner. She had her own TV show on Investigation Discovery or something like that for like a number of years. And that TV show was going on while she was a part of this trial. I looked it up. In other words, she was the star of the show. It was named after her, called Dr. G, Medical Examiner. And she was on that TV show during this. Now, remember all the times I've been like the multiple medical examiners, never seen this in a trial ever when it comes from the same side, right? And we know that Dr. Utz is the chief deputy medical examiner. We heard from him on the last episode. And that she was out of town when Caylee's remains were found. Dr. Utz was on the case, and then she comes back into town, and lo and behold, they have her take over. And this is really interesting. All right.
Good morning.
How are you presently employed?
I'm the chief medical examiner for Orange and Osceola counties.
And how long have you held that job?
I've been chief medical examiner since 2004.
Prior to being the chief medical examiner for District 9, where were you employed?
I was the deputy chief for a little less than a year, and then I was employed as a medical examiner in Bexar County, which is San Antonio, Texas, for 10 years. And prior to that, in the metropolitan Atlanta area. And I've been a medical examiner also in Jacksonville, Florida. And I trained as a medical examiner in Miami.
If you could just take us through your educational.
For anyone that, like, if someone wants to become a medical examiner, which I know the people that are, that do. Florida is a great place to be if that's what you're looking at, because there's just the homicides, right? There's just so many of them.
Experience that led you to your work as a medical examiner.
Sure. I'm a
StreamYard. StreamYard was doing good for a minute, and now
MD, medical doctor. That degree was from St. Louis University in St. Louis, Missouri, graduating in 1982. I then did my internship in internal medicine at the University Hospitals in St. Louis. I then specialized in pathology, both anatomic and clinical pathology. Anatomic pathology is basically the doctor at the hospital that looks under the microscope, does hospital autopsies, diagnoses diseases, and I'm board certified in that. That training was at the University Hospitals in St. Louis. I'm also trained in clinical pathology. That is basically the doctor that runs the laboratories. I'm board certified in that. I then subspecialized in forensic pathology. That is the field of pathology that specializes in why people die suddenly and unexpectedly. And it deals with ballistics through the body. It deals with injury interpretation. And that training was in Miami, 87 and 88, and I'm board certified in forensic pathology.
And after your educational experience, you became a medical examiner. You've told us where you've worked.
Yes, I just.
All right, taking us to today. Now, did you have occasion to become involved in the investigation of the death of Caylee Marie Anthony?
Yes, that came under under my jurisdiction.
Now, when did you first learn of the possibility that the remains of Caylee Anthony had been found?
That would have been on the 11th. I don't remember the time. Sometime in the late morning, early afternoon.
Were you alerted by law enforcement?
I was alerted by my chief investigator, Steve Hansen.
Upon learning of that, what did you do?
And I was late for the airport. I had already left the building, had run back in to pick up something that I'd forgotten. As I was walking out, Mr. Hansen told me that they had found the remains. And we weren't sure who that is for sure at that point. Oftentimes these scene recoveries take a long period of time. I had a engagement that I could not get out of. I was late for the airport, so I immediately contacted Dr. Utz and told him to initially handle it till I got back. I would be back the next day. I told Steve to make sure that Dr. Shultz was called. He's my anthropologist that's our consultant. And I believe I might have even talked to Dr. Shultz myself. I can't remember, but I made sure he was involved and I made sure Dr. Utz was able to handle it. I thought that initially, typically how we handle skeletal cases is that it takes a while for the recovery. They're brought in, they sit, and then we analyze. And it's a long process. I didn't think my absence for the night would matter.
Sure. Now, when you returned, you returned the following day?
Yes, that was Thursday. I returned Friday evening.
When you returned the following evening and for the day?
Back, and we're going to see what the question was, and then we're going to listen to her answer again.
Who that is?
Upon learning of that, what did you do? This is crazy. This is crazy. Okay, let's just get that question for now that we've got it on the screen.
And I was late for jurisdiction.
Oh, that's too far. Hold on. Sorry,
now,
guys.
When did you first learn of the
late morning, early afternoon?
Here we go.
Were you alerted by law enforcement?
I was alerted by my chief investigator, Steve Hansen.
Upon learning of that, what did you do?
And I was late for the airport. I had already left the building, had run back in to pick up something that I'd forgotten. As I was walking out, Mr. Hansen told me that they.
Upon learning of that, what did you do? I was late for the airport. Huh?
Found the remains. And we weren't sure who that is for sure at that point. Oftentimes these scene recoveries take a long period of time. I had a
setting up a narrative.
engagement that I could not get out of. I was late for the airport, so I immediately contacted Dr. Utz and told him to initially handle it till I got back. I would be back the next day. I told Steve to make sure that Dr. Shultz was called. He's my anthropologist that's our consultant. And I believe I might have even talked to Dr. Shultz myself. I can't remember, but I made sure he was involved and I made sure Dr. Utz was able to handle it. I thought that initially, typically how we handle skeletal cases is that it takes a while for the recovery. They're brought in, they sit, and then we analyze. And it's a long process. I didn't think my absence for the night would matter.
Sure. Now, when you returned, you returned the following day?
Yes, that was Thursday. I returned Friday evening.
When you returned the following evening and for the days and weeks after that, did you go back and review the photographs that had been taken both at the scene prior to the skull's removal and those taken at your facility while you were gone? Have you reviewed all those photographs?
Absolutely.
Now, once you arrived back and took the case back from Dr. Utz, did you continue to investigate and photograph additional items that were taken with the body?
Yes, I did. Case was discussed. I went out to the scene. I reviewed all the photographs. I made some suggestions for what else needed to be done, and made sure that we got some other different other consultants in also.
Is one of the things that you examined when you arrived back the hair mat which was surrounding the skull?
Eventually, that hair mat came back to me. It was sent to the FBI, and I asked for that back.
All right.
And that was sent back to me, and I examined it then.
Is this a photograph that was taken before it was that you reviewed, or is this one that was taken after it came back?
Looks like there's bone. It's oftentimes when you show me one picture and it's not in context,
Sure.
It's difficult to say, but it looks like there's still bone attached. So,
Would this have been one of the photographs you reviewed?
oh, this would have been one that I reviewed, certainly.
All right. Doctor, can you tell us what we're looking at in this photograph?
We're looking at the hair mat of the decedent of the case 81567.
What else do we see in the photograph other than hair?
We see a lot of the roots that have grown through the hair.
And again, what are we looking at here, Doctor?
We're also looking at the hair mat. We're also looking at the roots that have grown completely through the hair mat, and we're also looking at some holes. I don't know if you can, holes in the hair mat, probably from insect activity.
Do you recognize this photograph?
Yes, that's a photograph that we teased out some of the hair to take as a sample. This was teased out from that hair mat to take as a sample for possible toxicologic use.
Right. And does this photograph also show a scale showing the length of the hair?
Yes.
Again, the scale that you have here is to change my glasses, I'm sorry, 6-inch scale?
Yes.
All right, so this would reflect the length of the hair being at least more than 6 inches.
That is correct.
All right. And you recognize this is one of the photographs taken either at your direction or by your office?
Yes, that was actually taken at my direction. Again, a hair, that's the scale next to one of the roots on the hair mat.
This is just, and the purpose of the scale is to allow someone to compare the size of the root with a scale in the same picture. Some of the items that were found with the remains, did you examine and separately photograph a number of those?
Yes.
I want to specifically ask you about a blanket. You recall there being a baby blanket that was found,
Yes.
right? And did you have that photographed?
Yes.
Do you recognize this as a photograph of the blanket taken at your direction?
That was either taken at my direction or by someone in my staff. It's been photographed. It was photographed several times.
All right. This particular blanket, this is the condition that it came into your office. Is that correct? Hasn't been cleaned or anything like that?
It was not cleaned or it was just kind of unfolded.
Right. Are there certain portions of this blanket where you can detect a of some figures.
Yes.
Did you ask your staff to did they take a closer photograph to show those figures more clearly?
I might have even taken that photograph. I remember taking some, yes.
All right. And you recognize this photograph, DW?
Yes.
And is this the closer photograph trying to show the figures on the blanket?
Yes, it is.
Now, I'm going to ask Mr. Perez to zoom in on this figure. When you viewed that figure, did it look familiar to you?
Yes.
Who's that?
Winnie the Pooh with Piglet on its back.
And is this a photograph of the other side of that blanket?
Yes, it is.
Did that blanket have some plant material growing in it?
Yes.
And did you have that photographed as well to document the level of plant activity in the blanket?
Yes, I did.
Is that a photograph representing the amount of plant and root activity actually growing into the blanket?
Yes, it is.
So just tell us what we're looking at here.
This is a close-up of the edge of the blanket, the one with the Winnie the Pooh with Piglet. And it shows vegetative material, roots growing on top of and through the blanket.
This is a photograph of more root material growing into the blanket.
That's the same blanket with showing root material growing into it.
Was there also root material growing in the bag, that is the black plastic bag that was found with the remains?
There are two black plastic bags, and root material is growing through the holes in both those bags.
Does this photograph demonstrate the root material growing actually through the holes in the black plastic bag?
Yes.
Was there also a canvas laundry bag that was also found with the remains that you saw?
Yes, there was.
And were there roots growing within that item as well?
The canvas laundry bag was canvas on the outside and some type of kind of shiny vinyl type material on the inside, and it appears that the roots were just growing on top of and intricately applied to the canvas part of that bag.
And do you recognize that as a representative photograph showing the roots growing into the canvas bag?
Yes.
Would it be fair to say that roots, plant roots, were growing in and around virtually everything that was retrieved from this scene, that is the immediate area of the skull?
No, I don't think we saw any roots in the shorts.
Okay.
There were certainly roots in bones, but that was further out. Roots through the bag, and then the shirt was completely disintegrated, so it's difficult to say. But certainly the blanket, the two plastic bags, and the canvas bag.
And you said the shirt was disintegrated. All that was left was the lettering and a collar?
The lettering and the stitching,
stitching
along the hems and with the tag.
In order to assist in identifying the victim in this case, well, at the time that the bones were first found, how did you go about trying to identify who this child was?
Well, we thought the best identification was going to be through DNA. It's difficult to identify a child because oftentimes we'll use teeth or a dental comparison that was be difficult with this child because she's so young. And so we were hoping that we were going to get nuclear DNA, and then we knew that there would probably be at least mitochondrial DNA. So we thought the best way to go would be with the DNA.
And did your office send a bone off to the FBI laboratory for purposes of DNA identification?
Yes, we did.
Doctor, the portion that's missing from this bone, is that a procedure you're familiar with in determining DNA identification from bone?
Yes, they have to remove a piece of the bone to test, so they removed a piece of that right tibia.
Now, did you receive results from the FBI DNA laboratory as to the identification of the remains?
Yes.
And did that laboratory identify the remains as that is Caylee Marie Anthony?
Yes, they did.
Now, as a medical examiner, is it your job to determine two things, one called cause of death and one called manner of death?
Yes, that's the fundamental. It's fundamental to my job, and that's basically why we exist as an office.
Is manner of death determination a purely medical or scientific determination?
Yes, I'm sorry, the cause?
Manner of death.
The manner of death, it's based on scientific principles and ultimately gathering all the information you can about a case, all the circumstances of the case, all the history of the case, any medical history, knowing what the body showed, knowing all your ancillary tests. It's to take all of those things into consideration and any type of scientific information.
Let me show you some items that are marked for identification. First is State's Exhibit KL. You recognize that by your office's label as a bag that should contain the laundry bag that was found in evidence in this case.
Yes.
This time you...
I totally forgot to take this down. Y'all, I wanted to point this out. We're going to watch a little bit of this again, not too much, but just going back a couple seconds. So normally, I mean, oftentimes, okay, right? Let me know if y'all have experienced the same thing. We're in a trial, right? When they call the medical examiner, that's like the first thing they talk about is what is cause and manner of death. Like, what is it, right? And then usually they kind of go through things, and then at the very end, it's like, what are your findings? So here, she's actually not been on the stand for long at all. It's like pretty quick for a direct examination, and has not even used those words with her. We have the Pooh blankets and whatnot. And then he asks her, but listen to how he says it, because this is wild. I want to point something out.
And did that laboratory identify the remains as that is Caylee Marie Anthony?
Yes, they did.
Now, as a medical examiner, is it your job to determine...
Okay, I just was pausing real quick. So, good night. Then I hope, when did you send this? I didn't see this come in. Good night. Thank you so much for being here. I hope you have a wonderful Thanksgiving. Yeah, it's weird that she was so, maybe you'll hear some replay through. It's weird that she was removed because that like never happens. Like normally the way that the judge would be off of cases, you know, somebody makes a motion for them to recuse themselves, and then it's up to the judge, right? We see these cases all the time where the judge gets to decide if they're going to remove themselves. And the only thing I could think of was I was like, well, maybe a conflict of interest, but still, even then, the judge would have to recuse themselves. There's really not a pathway for other people to intervene. You're talking about like we saw it in YSL, they had to do this. They had to do this. And it took nothing short of a Herculean effort to get that judge removed. And I mean that in every way, like the amount of time, the amount of effort, the amount of things he did wrong. It's, anyway. So I don't know. It's interesting. It makes me wonder if she just took herself off the case, which I don't think normally you can do, but maybe she can because she's Judge Bev. I don't know. And of course, Proctor. I knew Proctor was involved in that as well. But okay, so here we go. He's finally asking this. Let me back up just a second here.
And did that laboratory identify the remains as that is Caylee Marie Anthony?
Yes, they did.
Now, as a medical examiner, is it your job to determine two things, one called cause of death and one called manner of death?
Yes, it's the fundamental. It's fundamental to my job, and that's basically why we exist as an office.
All right. So every time you've watched a trial, guys, think about it, right? And we hear the term cause and manner of death. That's how it's said. And whenever we have a trial, right, what do? They talk about cause and manner of death, and they say, okay, what is cause? Describe cause, right? And then what is manner? Describe manner. And then when it comes to when they're going to relate it to the victim in the case, it's like, okay, cause and manner of death. And you start with the cause. What is the cause, right? And usually that takes a good portion. And then the manner of death is usually pretty quick. Homicide or undetermined or whatever the case may be. And they go through. So the cause is the bulk of it, right? Usually. But the thing is that it's so like, it's a no-brainer every time they go in order, cause and manner of death. Listen to what happens here. This is wild.
Is manner of death determination a purely medical or scientific determination?
Yes, I'm sorry, the cause?
Manner of death.
She's even confused. Did you see that? Because she's like, wait, you're skipping cause and you're just going to talk about manner of death?
Manner of death, it's based on scientific principles and ultimately gathering
You know why? Because the cause is undetermined and the manner of death is homicide.
all the information you can about a case, all the circumstances of the case, all the history of the case, any medical history, knowing what the body showed, knowing all your ancillary tests. It's to take all of those things into consideration and any type of scientific information.
Let me show you some items that are marked for identification. First is State's Exhibit KL. You recognize that by your office's label as a bag that should contain the laundry bag that was found in evidence in this case.
Yes.
This time you take remove into evidence State's Exhibit K.
He's not yet gone. I mean, is he just procrastinating? Is he just not going to ask her? Is he just hoping that no one will notice and that they'll just be like, okay, yeah, we don't need a cause of death, just a manner? I mean,
Yeah.
What says the defense?
Let me show you what's been marked in evidence. State's Exhibit for identification KU. And ask you if you recognize that by markings as the bag that should contain the baby blanket photograph we saw earlier.
Yes.
This time, Your Honor, State would move into evidence State's Exhibit KU for identification. Next would be State's Exhibit KM. You recognize this as, by the markings of your office, as the container that should contain the body bag with the vegetation that was brought with the evidence.
Yes, I do.
This time, Your Honor, move into evidence State's Exhibit KM for identification. Show you State's Exhibit KK for identification. Do you recognize that by the markings as the bag that should contain the tied black plastic bag that was brought in with the remains?
Yes, I do.
This time, Your Honor, State would move into evidence State's Exhibit KK. Show you State's Exhibit KO for identification. Do you recognize that by the markings as the bag that should contain the untied plastic bag that was found with the remains?
Yes.
This time, Your Honor, State will move to evidence. State's Exhibit KO. Let me show you what's been marked. State's Exhibit identification KR, and ask you by the markings, that's the bag that should contain the shorts that we looked at in the photograph.
The shorts.
The shorts.
I didn't see the shorts in the photograph, I don't believe, but those
shorts
are
that were
the
in
shorts.
photographs. Let me stop. Did you review photographs of items that were taken and examined by Dr. Baez?
No, I examined those.
Those, okay, and they should be in there.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. They will move down to State's Exhibit KR. Let me show you State's Exhibit KT and ask you if by the markings that should be the bag containing the clothing, the letters, and the stitching.
Yes,
And those are things that were brought in with the body, is that correct?
that is correct.
State will move into evidence State's Exhibit KT.
What says the defense?
Dr. Neller, we've got the housekeeping out of the way. We were discussing the concepts of cause and manner of death, and I believe you were explaining to the jury what manner of death means. Could you explain that, please?
The manner of death.
Manner of death.
The manner is the classification of death based on all of the information that is available to us, both scientific information, both scene information, both historic information, anything that will help us classify that death.
it's so crazy how he's like, okay, now we got all that out of the way. It's like he was procrastinating on this. I mean, that's just wild.
As to accident, natural, homicide, suicide, or undetermined.
And in assessing all that thing, the medical evidence, the scientific
All that
evidence, and the
All that
scene
thing.
evidence, do you bring to bear your experience in forensic pathology?
Absolutely.
In this particular case, based upon everything
what
that
they're going to have to do is they're going to have to get her to talk about how the cause doesn't matter nearly as much as the manner of death and that they can tell it was a homicide. We'll see.
you have seen, the photographs, the skeleton itself, Do you have an opinion as to the manner of death in this case?
Yes.
What is that opinion?
Homicide.
I didn't ask the cause yet.
What do you base that on?
It's based on three main
Here's why this is awful.
items.
Here's why this is awful. Because he's starting. This makes me so mad. He's starting with manner of death because he's hoping. It doesn't. We know it doesn't work. But even if I didn't know the outcome, I would be like, "There's no way." Like, no. Like, he's starting with this to try to convince the jury that using manipulative, stupid. I hate this shit. Just hate this shit. You guys will hear this. It's really gross. This manipulative, like, shit that's like I don't want to spoil it, but the words that come out of her mouth should never come out of the mouth of a medical examiner ever. And I'm shocked that this happened. Her TV show should have been canceled after this. It's trying to, oh God, it's everything a trial shouldn't be. This is a medical examiner testifying about cause and manner of death, but really focusing on the manner of death. And wait till you hear what she says and how disgusting it is. And you'll see why the hope is to get the jury thinking about this thing, right? So that by the time he wastes all this time or spends all this time about the manner of death and what she's basing that on, by the time he gets to cause of death, it's not going to matter to them because they're already going to be like, oh, well, it doesn't matter. We already know Casey killed her, right? That's what he's hoping for. It's so infuriating to me.
Forensic pathology.
Absolutely.
In this particular case, based upon everything that you have seen, the photographs, the skeleton itself, do you have an opinion as to the manner of death in this case?
Yes.
What is that opinion?
Homicide.
What do you base that on?
It's based on three main items. First, we know from observational studies, from experience, that it is a red flag that when a child is not reported immediately to authorities, either with an injury, that's something we look for foul play. This child, from history, was not reported for a long time. The other thing that makes it a homicide is that the body was hidden. A child's body is thrown out, hidden in a field. We know that is one of the things we look for when we are looking for a homicide. Also, it's often found that these bodies are in, not always, but closed containers, a suitcase or a plastic bag like this child was. That, again, is from our experience from observational systematic studies, a red flag for homicide. And the last, besides the delay, besides the being found in a field decomposed, would be the duct tape, somewhere located on the lower half of this face. There is no child that should have duct tape on its face when it dies. There is no reason to put duct tape on the face after they die. Based on our experience, we've seen that in cases of homicide.
Now, how does the concept of cause of death differ from the concept of manner of death?
Well, the cause of death is the injury or the disease that initiates the chain of events that ultimately results in the child dying or the person dying. So the cause is the specific injury or disease that ultimately causes the death.
In this case, based on the skeletal condition of the remains, can you render a medical conclusion on the cause of death?
The cause of death, what I put was homicide of undetermined means. I believe we can reliably say it's a homicide, but I don't know the means for which that homicide occurred.
Were there any objects found with the body that would have been capable of causing death?
Well, the only possible objects with the body, although I don't know if they cause death, and I'm not even speculating whether they cause death, would be duct tape. If that duct tape was over the mouth and nose, that's a possibility. Suffocation with a plastic bag would have been the only other thing I would have seen there.
Right. You are aware, are you not, of the evidence of chloroform being found during certain portions of the investigation of this case?
I was made aware of that, yes.
Could a child exposed to a sufficient amount of chloroform die as a result?
Absolutely.
But at this point, based upon the medical evidence, can you tell what caused her death?
No, I believe we have enough evidence, and I believe it's scientifically defensible to say it's a homicide, but I do not believe we have enough scientific information to say the means of how that homicide occurred.
Now, are there certain things that you can exclude? In other words, was there any trauma to the body that would
Well,
connote?
the trauma is very, their body is very decomposed. All I have is bones. So unless that trauma hurt the bones, I can't say. There's certainly, I've had other cases where there's been blunt trauma to the abdomen, and I can't say from the skeleton. So I can't rule out really any trauma, because sometimes even a gunshot wound would go through, and not touch the bone. So it's very difficult when the body is that decomposed to say why they died.
Now, in this case, was there any injury to the bones that would indicate trauma involving the bone?
There is no ante-mortem injury to the bones that would indicate the cause.
And were you made aware of any illnesses that the child suffered that could have caused death, anything of that
I
sort?
specifically asked for any history of illness or problems with this child, and I was told there were none.
No further questions. Thank you, Doctor.
Right. So we are really getting into the state pivoting, right? It's not the chloroform anymore, it's the duct tape. Well, I'm not going to give it away. There's an amazing moment that's going to happen in the next episode that really, Jose Baez says exactly what I'm thinking when it comes to this. And it's a really unique role reversal, right? From what we normally see in trials. So, all right, yay, on to cross-examination.
Cross-examination.
How you doing?
Hello.
You okay?
I'm okay.
All right.
Love it. Just like how the last guy, you ready? The way he just said this, dude. And also look at his lanyard. He's wearing his special counsel badge. None of the other attorneys wear that, and he's wearing his. I just love that so much. But that is awesome. You know what that says to me? It's like, if she thought she was okay, she now knows she's not going to be okay. And now she's not okay.
Now, Dr. Garavaglia, you live in the Orlando area. Don't tell me where, but in the Orlando area.
Yes, yes, in the area.
Okay. And for the period of time of about 4 months prior to these remains being found, you were aware of all of the media attention surrounding this case, weren't you?
I was aware that this was a big case. I do not watch the news, and I listen to NPR, so I don't think I was as aware as most people.
Certainly, if you were wise enough to not necessarily rely on the news, you were aware that there was, in fact, a circus-like atmosphere around the Anthony home. Yes?
I don't know that.
Oh. Well, you knew it was, a lot of speculation, a lot of news about this case for months. Yes?
I did know that there was a lot of speculation about this case.
And you knew that if, unfortunately, remains were found of this child, that your office would be most likely involved.
No, I was hoping it was Lake County.
You were hoping it was Lake County, push it off to the west. Okay.
Different jurisdiction.
Or so anywhere other than the 9th. Oh.
That's what I would have liked.
But in fact, you were called and you came back from wherever other business you were on to handle this case.
Because I'm sure he's going to get to it. Because the fact that she said that is insane, right? Because as we know, Dr. Utz was the initial assigned medical examiner to this case. This is her just trying to make it seem like there wasn't some weird fishiness and some bias and some bullshit going on, because it doesn't make any sense. Like, I hate this so much, what Florida did with this prosecution. Like, it just, there's a lot of ickiness with a lot of cases and a lot of things that are like unfair. And but what they've got going on in this one, they've even got a celebrity medical examiner. It's like they took it up a million notches in terms of their effort to try to convict somebody. It's really wild. And but anyway, here she goes saying, like, I wish it had happened somewhere else. It's like, ma'am, you were not assigned to this. Dr. Utz already testified, and he said he could have provided the cause and manner of death. He could have done the autopsy. He could have done everything. You didn't have to get involved. So,
That's true.
And amongst the various things that you had known prior was news or references, as Mr. Ashton just referred to, regarding the potential of chloroform being involved in this case.
oh yes,
I was told that by investigations at the time we got the body.
You weren't told that the chloroform related to decomposition, but just that there was chloroform involved.
That there was a question of chloroform.
So you then reasoned that perhaps chloroform may have been used, in fact,
this is great.
to contribute to the cause of death of this child.
I think that would be one of the possibilities.
Yeah, go ahead and y'all. This is insane. What happens? What comes out here? Because this is the thing is why it's like, again, why are they pivoting to duct tape? Why are they pivoting to duct tape? We're getting an end to this, or an answer to this question here. Let me pull it up real quick before we get the actual answer. Because in terms of, this question was really kind of like, what did we think the state's theory was, right? So we're about to get a more definitive answer on that, because wait till we hear what they say about the chloroform. And it's incredible that they've been riding that theory this entire trial when they already knew what these results were going to say. And we're going to hear about them. I think it's from her. It might be the next episode, but we're going to hear some pretty shocking results about the toxicology. And it's like, what are we doing? And then now they're pivoting to duct tape.
That we would have to examine.
So one of the things that you did in order to examine that possibility was to bring in an expert. Yes?
I brought in a toxicologist that I knew had dealt with toxicology of bones, which is not a common thing.
And that toxicologist was a PhD, Dr. Bruce Goldberger from the University of Florida.
It was.
And you sent to him a piece of bone that had been resected from the humerus, was it?
The femur.
Pardon?
The left femur.
Left femur.
You know what? He's going nice and slow. I bet the jury already knows. It's like, I'm watching this and I'm like, I already know what the answer is going to be, because that's how this case is going. I bet the jury, they got to see this coming. They got to. This jury was smart. And that he did such a great job of pointing out by mentioning the duct tape first and then bringing up the chloroform, just to make it clear what's going on.
We had a picture of it a while ago.
No, that was the tibia taken for the DNA. The picture I saw.
Which part was sent to Dr. Goldberger so he could test for the presence of chloroform?
The piece of the left femur.
And as a toxicologist, the specific request was to look for chloroform and other what you call volatile chemicals. Is that right?
That is correct.
Meaning you were looking for chloroform and some form of poison.
Volatiles would have been alcohol, isopropanol.
Any kind of chemical that might have contributed to the cause of this child's death.
Yes.
And Dr. Goldberger, pursuant to your direction, submitted these samples to a myriad of toxicological examination tests, didn't he?
Not really a myriad. He only did checked for volatiles and several other tests. It was very limited what he can do with bone.
Whatever tests were available that could be done, were done.
He tried.
And when they were done, the results were negative as to each and every one.
That is correct.
Well, there you go, guys.
Now, in connection with this whole process, were you present when Dr. Werner Spitz came as a defense expert to want to observe the process.
Can we approach?
You may continue.
I may not be exactly verbatim, but I asked you if the Dr. Werner Spitz came down to observe or participate in the autopsy.
Did he? No.
No? Were you aware of him coming down to want to watch your work?
Hearsay. Question to counsel.
Overruled.
I was informed by my office manager that Mr. Jose Baez had requested.
Objection, Your Honor. I don't believe that's what the court indicated counsel could ask.
He's already allowed me to ask the question. She's
Well,
just answering it.
We got it.
Overruled. Go ahead and finish asking the
Do it.
question. Doctor.
Go ahead, Nan.
Go ahead.
I will be honest, I wonder if it's a strategy on purpose that they put him on these crucial medical witnesses, because again, Jose Baez is an incredible defense attorney. He's one of my favorites. But I wonder if as a team, they know that this judge is friends with this attorney and clearly treats him completely different than he treats Mr. Baez. And if that's part of the reason why they put him, I mean, he's doing a phenomenal job. So there's that. But also, I wonder if it's like, if Mr. Baez had made these exact same, or asked these exact same questions in the exact same way and at the same time, any objections would have been sustained. There's just not a question. So, but these are getting overruled. And so I wonder if that was part of, they want to get this information out, right? So.
I was informed by my office manager there was a request by Jose Baez to bring an outside person in to watch the autopsy, and our policy in the autopsy is that we have a statutory duty to come up with the cause and manner of death. We would preserve everything possible then and make that available to him when we are finished.
Okay. And you told Mr. Ashton that in your determination of the manner of death, you consider all kinds of circumstances.
Yes, I do.
And in doing that, in this case, are you aware of whether or not Dr. Spitz, in fact, did a second autopsy?
Objection, hearsay.
Sustained.
Okay. Now, I want to go back just briefly to Dr. Goldberger. I've been reminded that he's a medical doctor, isn't he?
No, he's not.
He's not?
Dr. Goldberger? He's a PhD.
Is he also a medical doctor?
Not to my knowledge.
All right. Well, what things do you know that he tested besides that piece of bone?
Let's see. For volatiles, he tested bone, the scrapings I took from the inside of the bone, the hair and soil that kind of fell out of the hair. And that was for volatiles. And then he tested the bone, and then the scrapings from the bone marrow, and washings we did from the cranial cavity. And he tested that for by gas chromatograph for prescription drugs, illicit drugs. And then he tested specifically for alprazolam in the bone, the scrapings of the bone cavity, the washings of the cranial cavity were all then specifically tested for alprazolam.
And alprazolam, what's a more common name?
It's a benzodiazepam, also known as XANAX.
There it is. No Xanax, guys. I mean, I already knew that because, it's just crazy. Even on the last episode, there were still people talking about the Xanax, that she was drugged and stuff. And I'm like, what? Because I didn't want to give away what was going to happen, because clearly they haven't watched it, right? I didn't want to give away what comes out in this testimony. So I stuck with what I've already covered, because we're going in order, right? And what came out in the Orange County Sheriff's Office investigative report, and that they were fishing so hard to try to find evidence of drugs, and they couldn't find anything. In fact, only they found the opposite. And it's so wild that they really, here's the thing. The fact that they asked for Xanax to be tested, that the state asked for it, is insanity to me. Here's where they got that from, guys. Tony Lazzaro had a roommate, and that roommate was prescribed Xanax. That roommate said, point blank, in all of the statements, with his sworn statements to law enforcement, that he never gave her any Xanax. He never saw her take any Xanax. He never sold her any Xanax. She never had his Xanax. And then you also have additionally everybody saying she didn't use drugs at all, or she just smoked weed occasionally. So all they got is a roommate who's prescribed a medication that he takes that she doesn't take. But that's how desperate they are, that they tested for XANAX. It blows my mind. And it came back negative. And you know what? People are still thinking she was drugged with XANAX. I don't even have words. Don't have words. Nope. No words.
XANAX.
Yes,
So he tested for all those things and all the results were negative.
that is correct.
And speaking of the cranial wash you did not cut open the cranium, did you?
No, absolutely not.
Now, you told Mr. Ashton also that there was no trauma found in your examination, correct?
No antemortem trauma, meaning prior to death. We found some postmortem trauma from animals chewing on bones, and
You found the postmortem trauma. The anthropologist confirmed to you that there was indication of animal activity, right?
oh, you could say that.
Okay.
That was part of my examination.
But anything that happened before, there's no evidence of any form of trauma before when this child was alive.
On the bones, there was no evidence of trauma.
And in your exploring all the world of circumstances about this,
I don't know what you help somebody. Like if somebody's like, to the people who still think she was drugged with Xanax, and that was involved here. I don't know. What do you do? What do you do when you say, well, look at the Orange County Sheriff's investigative report. The evidence is the opposite of that. Law enforcement tried. They went fishing for it. They got the opposite. But the state still tested. And then you do it one further. It's right. Okay, so there's that. Like that already should be enough. But just in case you're still like, it was the Xanax. The toxicology showed no Xanax. But they still think it was Xanax. What do you do for people when it's like, oh, yeah, she was drugged with Xanax? It's like, I don't know what I don't know how to, I don't know what I can do to help with this.
didn't find about any trauma either, did you?
No, I did not.
So if I understand your testimony, the long and short of it are confirming that despite the investigations, the toxicology, the anthropologists, all of these things, there is no scientific or medical evidence to establish the cause of this child's death. Is that correct?
The means of the homicide could not be determined.
And you determined to call it a homicide as opposed to an accident or indeterminate.
The circumstances of death did not fit anything but a homicide.
The circumstances.
That's the way the body was found.
Okay.
And not
I know
reporting
that.
the body.
And also what Detective Melich told you.
I'm not, what part did Dr. Melich tell me? The
What-
part that the body wasn't reported for 31 days was what
You learned these things from Yuri Melich, an investigator.
that's our standard
And some of the
course
things-
of business.
Some of the things you learned from the media.
From you?
Media
Oh, media. No, nothing from media would have been entered into my decision.
didn't enter your mind.
Well, I can't take anything that the media would say into a decision as grave as this.
So the bottom line is when you say, and you place the label homicide, the indeterminate means, you're saying that circumstantial evidence to you says that it probably was a homicide.
Not probably. I think that is the only logical conclusion based scientifically on some of the scientific information we have, based on observational information we have about homicides and children dying.
Here's
What
where
is-
it gets really offensive to me and really gross.
This is scientific information, the circumstance.
Well, we know, and of course, systematic observational studies are part of science. That's a big part of forensic. It's a big part of how we know our world. We look at all the accidental drownings, for instance, in my jurisdiction. We systematically went through those. 100% EMS is called immediately when the child is found.
Well, that has nothing to do with
Oh,
this case, does it, Doctor?
Oh, no.
Argumentative.
Sustained.
Okay.
Go ahead, Doctor.
It absolutely has something to do with this case. Every death I investigate has to put into the circumstances of death. You can never, ever determine a manner of death, except in very rare instances, just on examining the body. And so it always has to. So we need to know how usually.
It's interesting to hear her say this, because if you guys remember Dr. Ellen Riemer from Murdoch, and she had done like a bazillion autopsies and she was awesome and just very scientific, you know, she said the opposite. I mean, how many times do you guys remember her saying, I examined the body? And in fact, she does not look at crime scene pictures on purpose. She does not look at pictures of the crime. She examines the body. And the other thing that wasn't there is, you know, in other words, you know, you hear this with her. We've heard this in other cases where, you know, law enforcement is present, right? Law enforcement, the detectives are present. Law enforcement is present for the autopsy. And like that to me doesn't, it does not sit well with me, right? We know that was also the case for Karen Reed, and there was maybe a little bit of, you know, intimidation going on. We saw the text messages about the medical examiner, but anyway, you know, and so here we have her where it's not, you know, they haven't even gotten to the point, law enforcement being there, you know, it's like she already talked to Detective Mellich ahead of time, and he had already told her this and that and the other thing. And then just the fact that she's saying it's part of this is just wild to me. She's like, it's not just about examining the body. You have to take in all this. And it's like, that is the exact opposite of what we've heard from, I mean, at least one other medical examiner, one who I think is phenomenal and did a really great job and really relied on the evidence, scientific evidence of the body. I mean, what she's saying doesn't make sense, right? Like what she's saying, it's like she's trying to convince you that this is okay, but you should be examining the body. I mean, anyway.
Deaths occur. So we have to know, and there's scientific studies in peer review literature about some of the red flags for homicide.
Objection to the bolstering. She's now talking about studies. We don't have them.
Overruled.
So by my experience and by what is known about the way homicides occur, I felt that the preponderance of evidence and that there was no other logical conclusion could be found by not reporting a child for 30, who has a legal, moral, and ethical obligation to care for a child, not reporting that child missing. The fact that it's tossed in a field to rot in bags is a clear indication that the body was trying to be hidden. Those are, even it being put in a bag is a very big red flag for homicide, and never seen in an accidental death of a child.
Have you guys caught what is so atrocious about this? It'd be one thing if she's saying, okay, she's again, I don't agree with what she's saying about here's all these circumstances and this should be help you determine the manner of death. Okay, I don't agree with that premise in the first place. But even if you go that route, saying something like the way the body was dumped, right? And dumped, you know, for any case, right? It's dumped in a dumpster, whatever the case is, you know, like, yep, that definitely looks like there's an indication that something funny happened. Is that enough to say definitely homicide? No. People do. There are so many cases where there's accidents and people do that, right? In fact, one of the potential things for Karen Reed, right, was like, was there some sort of accident? And this is just sort of my opinion, not from Karen, but from the McAlberts, right? Anyway, but not, you know, then they just left him there and then pinned it on her. Anyway, but there's tons of cases, right? But even still, that is, that at least doesn't, God, this makes me so upset. It's hard to even get the words out. That at least doesn't tie her finding of the manner of death to another person specifically, because that's not her job. Let me make sure that's really clear. Her job is not to base her determination of the manner of death, to base that determination on who she thinks did it. Now, with that being said, let me back this up so we can listen to this, because this is really important, really important.
The way homicides occur, I felt that the preponderance of evidence and that there was no other logical conclusion could be found by not reporting a child for 30, who has a legal, moral, and ethical obligation to care for a child, not reporting that child missing.
This, this is horrifying because her job is not to decide who committed the homicide, right? That's what she's done. Should never be happening. You determine the cause and manner of death, and that's it. It's even worse. It's not just that it's like implying the person that did it. She's basing, it's backward. It's completely backwards. It's completely backwards. It's like basing the manner of death on what she thinks happened based on not reporting the child missing, which is not a homicide. And what it is indicating is that here she is, the medical examiner, right? An expert. What she is saying, if you read between lines, I'm not saying she's trying to convince anybody. I'm saying this is her opinion coming out, obviously, is like the manner of death is homicide. And obviously it was Caylee. And why do I say that? Because Caylee's the one who was supposed to report her missing. And she based that manner of death, at least very much partially, on the fact that Caylee was not reported missing by her mom. I don't.
The fact that it's tossed in a field to rot in bags is a clear indication that the body was trying to be hidden. Those are, even it being put in a bag is a very big red flag for homicide, and never seen in an accidental death of a child. And the fact that there's duct tape anywhere attached to that child's face is, to me, indication of a homicide.
Okay, now let's back up.
This is wild. I'm glad he's not getting angry. This just blows my mind.
About your circumstantial observations and deductions is scientific, ma'am?
The fact that we know 100% of the time that accidental deaths are reported unless there is a good reason not to be. We know that there is no reason not to report. In fact, if you do not report an injury to authorities, you are risking that child's life. So we know.
Yeah, she and everybody else has already testified, one after another, that Caylee had no injuries. I can't, y'all.
That's partly behavioral science. And we know in all of the cases that come through our morgue that accidents are 100%, particularly on children, are reported unless there's a good reason not to.
So you're trying to tell this jury 100% that there's no way that this death could have been accidental?
No, I said 100% of the time. Let's say on a systematic review of drownings, it's one of the more common.
She's changing it. That's a very smart question to ask her, because she's changing it, because she sees that she's good. So, because she did actually say that, not right now, but earlier in her cross, she did actually say, he gave her another out, and she said, no, I'm 100% sure it's the only option. It's the only option, she said. And now he's asking it again, and she's trying to be a sneaky weasel by not answering it and instead pretending like she's misunderstanding the question, as if it was about the statistic about people reporting them as. This is insane. Sorry.
Common accidents. 100% of the time, when the person finds the child,
that's not what he's asking.
They call 911 because there is a chance that child might live. They need to report that and give them a chance.
And what if a person finds an obviously drowned body that's so obviously deceased? What then? Is there some scientific thing to your conclusion about their morality?
No, but what I'm looking at the behavior as a systematic observational information that shows that no matter how stiff that body is, they always call 911 on the hopes that child could be saved.
This is insane. I don't think anybody can make that claim the way she's making it. There's so many generalizations here, and again, I don't think that this is actually true, but if anyone could make such a similar claim, it would have to be someone who's in the social sciences field, right? Like, I don't even know. But it would be so hard to even actually gather that data because of so many extenuating circumstances that I don't think a study like that would ever be considered reliable. She's just saying this stuff as if it's true. And this is blowing my mind. She's a medical examiner. And how much has she talked about with actually the body? So little.
I'm looking at observational data on that kind of death.
Behavior. You're observing behavior? And you're observing behavior not of the victim, but of who you think committed the crime? You shouldn't be allowed. Like, if you've already decided you think this person did something, like, you shouldn't be allowed to then, after that, determine a manner of death when you already think you know what happened. You shouldn't be allowed. And you shouldn't be allowed to be a medical examiner if you're relying on your own just personal observations and opinions based on someone's behavior. Unless that person is the victim, which she's not basing it on that. She's basing it on the mother.
That's what we use.
Even if it's the victim, that's still a stretch because really you're just supposed to examine the body.
So you're saying then, by your determination, the circumstantial evidence is that's what causes you to conclude it must have been a homicide because you can't explain it any other way.
I explained to you the red flags that we know in forensics
of all, Doctor,
based on behavioral science.
You need to answer my question.
I don't understand.
Your Honor?
Just a second, folks. Mr.
Look at him. He knows he's winning. This is insane. And this just, the fact, I'll never get over it. They were seeking the death penalty. I mean, this is just blowing my mind. And this isn't just their star witness. This isn't just their star expert. This isn't just their star expert medical examiner. This is their star second expert medical examiner who actually happens to also be an actual star on TV at the time. And this is what we're getting out of this.
Ashton, objection?
Objection to counsel instructing the witness.
I'd ask the court to instruct her to answer my question. The question I asked her called for a yes or no answer.
Please repeat the question.
Objection sustained, Mr. Basin. The question did not call for a yes or no answer. It was sort of open-ended. So if you want a yes or no answer.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the last part.
Okay. All right. Doctor, did you finish answering the question?
I don't even know what the question was.
See?
Okay, then let's have a new question.
I don't even remember. The bottom line is, let's just take it and make it simple. Cause of death, you don't know. Manner of death, you say based on the circumstantial evidence, you conclude that it was a homicide for the reasons you told us.
I felt that the manner of death, although the cause of death is homicide by undetermined means, I felt the means were unable to be substantiated scientifically. I felt the manner of death was defensible scientifically based on systematic observational studies.
Okay. Of observational studies of other things, other cases.
Of homicide, how homicides occur, how accidents occur, how natural deaths occur, yes.
Other cases.
Other cases.
Okay. Now, by the way, if these remains had been found 4 or 5 months before, would you have had better chance at scientific evidence?
Absolutely.
And incidentally, you said something about duct tape. Isn't it true from what you observed and saw, if there was any duct tape, it was only in the vicinity of the lower mandible?
That's correct.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Doctor.
Yeah. And the thing is like, why does that matter? Because if the state is trying to pivot from chloroform because the toxicology came back no chloroform, no drugs also for anyone that missed that part. But it was the duct tape. That's why the fact that it was only on the lower mandible, that means not the whole mouth. That means not the nose. I just, and the other thing is like, that's why it's also significant that it was attached to like the hair or whatever, like the hair mat, they keep calling it, which is just gross. But, like in other words, it's not like the tape just kind of fell off and that's why it's there, right? It's been very clear from all of the testimony that the tape was still in place and it hadn't moved, hadn't slid. it was still where it was, however it got there. And the thing is that it does not cover the mouth and nose. It's just on the bottom part of the chin. So, or jaw, whatever. Same thing.
Any redirect? You may proceed.
Doctor, Mr. Mason asked you about your knowledge of the defense's desire to do a second autopsy of the body.
Yes.
Did you attempt to keep the body in exactly the same condition it was when you received it?
Yes, we did, except for what we had to take for a DNA and for the possible toxicologic testing.
You left the roots in the bones just as you found them?
Yes.
And
In
left
fact,
the-
we packaged it nicely so they could keep the anatomic groups together.
And you left the skull intact just as you had found it?
Yes, that's normal procedure for an anthropologic exam, is to keep that intact.
The absence of positive results for chloroform or other substances, does that, as a matter medically, exclude the acute use of those substances at or near the time of death?
Right. We would not expect to find any of those things positive in a bones. That was a long shot trying to check for those, but I thought we would be amiss not to at least try. We would not expect any of those to be positive in a set of bones, even if they were positive at the time of death, even if it was present.
Taking for the purposes of my question, for the following hypothetical, the following facts.
I mean, that just makes sense.
Assume that Caylee Anthony died and was discarded on or about June 16th of 2008, approximately 6 months before the body was found.
Yes.
At the stage that Mr. Mason was asking you about 4 months earlier, which would have been August, so the body's been out for 2 months. What would be the body's condition after 2 months?
Oh, well, it's probably be skeletal.
Wait. Let me back that up. Did he just say what I think he just said? No way.
We would not expect any of those to be positive in a set of bones, even if they were positive at the time of death, even if it was present.
Taking for the purposes of my question, for the following hypothetical, the following facts. Assume that Caylee Anthony died and was discarded on or about June 16th of
Okay, never mind. He didn't say what I thought he said. Okay, never mind.
2008, approximately 6 months before the body was found.
Yes.
At the stage that Mr. Mason was asking you about 4 months earlier, which would have been August, so the body's been out for 2 months. What would be the body's condition after 2 months?
Oh, well, it's probably be skeletonized. Certainly would be skeletonized by then.
So if the body had been found in, August, would you expect that it would have been skeletonized with very little soft tissue?
Yes, I would expect it to be skeletonized.
Would you expect the internal organs to be completely?
Completely gone.
Recourse as to those issues? Okay, doctor, you may be excused.
And there it is, guys. We are done with no, we're not done. We're done with the forensic pathologist, to my knowledge. I'm sure we'll see some from the defense, but at least for the state anyway. But we have more experts on the next one. There's a lot of crazy stuff. In case you missed it, the title for the next one is called The Magic Duct Tape. So there's a lot of craziness in store, but that's it for this episode. So for anyone who is celebrating Thanksgiving, I hope you all have a wonderful holiday. However it is that you choose to celebrate. I may end up popping on for a stream. I had plans with my family, and as it turns out, a number of people in my immediate family have been either tested positive for COVID or exposed to COVID. So we're kind of postponing that. So I may actually do a live stream. I've been talking about this thing I want to do. Well, there's some things I need to do for follow-up for Brian Koberger. So anyway, I might have a stream for that tomorrow. We'll just sort of see what I get put together. I don't know that anybody would be even watching, on things, but you never know. So we'll see. But the next episode for this will be on be happening probably within the next couple days as we progress further and further towards the end of the state's case in chief. Also we have to look forward to, guess who testifies again? Cindy Anthony for the millionth time, although still not as many times as George. But we actually, there's quite a few witnesses that come back again for the however many times. So there's that as well. And but they're getting close to the end, and it seems like they're saving Roy Kronk for like the bitter end. And the way, just to remind everybody, Jose Baez, the nickname for him, stuck the first time I heard it in opening statements when he called him the three-legged pony. He said something like, Roy Kronk is the state's three-legged pony, and they're going to ride him to the finish line. That just stuck, and I'm like, I can't wait to see this guy. So anyway, but thanks so much for watching. Thanks for being here. I hope to see y'all soon, and love y'all. And if I can find it, I'll go ahead and roll the outro. See you next time.